Right. So hello everybody and welcome to I think it's probably the first time I've ever done a Fruity Rambles live. I am joined today with Master Fisher Tyo'to Tayuun. As I've given this introduction before and I will continue to give it again, Tyo'to Tayuun is probably one of the most, if not the most, knowledgeable and experienced fishers in all of Final Fantasy XIV. If I ever have any questions, Tyo'to is the first person I go to. He is the behind orchestrating all of our discovery periods, master of spreadsheets, and all of those wonderful resources that you see that I don't necessarily make. Tyo'to probably did, or at least had a hand in them. Tyo'to, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Hello, Tyo'to Tayuun. I like fishing in Final Fantasy XIV. I've been playing since the pre-launch in A Realm Reborn, and uh, I don't know. I've been big fishing since big fishing came out in patch 2.2, and I like learning things about fishing. And since the only way to learn about anything is to fish a lot, I do a lot of fishing.
You, I believe, are the only person I know who has, I think it's what, five final fish?
Yes.
Yeah, you have five. For comparison to everybody else, I have three. And I don't think there's anyone, I don't know of anyone who has four, but it's like, it's a lot of fishing. So Tyo'to, when you are looking at a lot of spreadsheets that have like bite rates, like pure bite rates, that aren't from Teamcraft, it is likely Tyo'to who has manually gone through and caught all of those fish to give us clean bite rates. So if you don't know Tyo'to, you're going to get to know him pretty well here over the next. I don't know how long this is going to be. This is basically two people who are extremely passionate about fishing, given free reign to discuss a very, I don't know how to put it, interesting patch cycle for big fishing. And yeah, why don't we just dive in? So, patch 7.4 added 8 new big fish, and these were Esperance Carp, Datnioides Aeroplanos, Heirloom Goldgrouper, Moxutural Greatgar, Shin Snuffler, Shuckfin Dace, Punuity Pain, and the now somewhat infamous Purse of Riches. We're going to talk about all of those fish individually and what we think about them and uh, our thoughts and stuff. I basically just gave Tyo'to a blank check and a microphone and said, "Here, go," and we're gonna have some fun with this. But before we get into the specific fish, is there anything you want to start off with? How did 7.4 Discovery go? Anything that stands out just broadly about these fish that we want to start with?
Well, I think something to uh that a fairly at least to me a common sentiment that I saw, and I think this is due to for whatever reason in 7.3 a lot more people, new people were participating in the Discovery channel in the fishing Discord, and that stayed the same in 7.4. So there are a lot of things pointed out about the fish that people were like, well, this is unexpected, or this is strange, or this is weird. And a lot of it isn't historically. But if you have only been big fishing either very recently or even in Endwalker, a lot of what this patch uh, involves collectively might seem novel or new, but it is in some way a return to, uh, I guess, more uh,
Bygone era.
basically. But
Yeah.
also there are some. strange things about it that are very apparent that people noticed, like the times are particularly clearly intentional, and I
Yeah.
don't know why they are continuing to handle time this way, because that is new.
So
But
when, yeah, so when folks, because I've seen the same thing where we have a lot of new people coming in, at least over the past few patches. I think even 7.2, it felt like we had a little bit more. Um, but 7.3 for sure had a ton more people, and obviously 7.4, where we were bringing in what, like 100 data points for discovery in some cases. I think a lot of the, like, whoa, this is, why is this happening? To you and me is like, oh, well, this has happened like 6 times before already. Uh, is I think it's showing though that there's a lot of new people interested in fishing, and the fact that they're coming and doing discovery means that there is a level of investment that we haven't seen. Because usually we'll see like a bunch of people will come and do big fishing, but it's not until like the end of a patch cycle. So after 7.45 or after 7.35, we would see an uptick. At least I do on my guides. That's usually when I start seeing the most interest in my guides, is after all the content comes out. But the fact that we're seeing that all front loaded now is actually really, really good. But also the fact that we're seeing a lot of surprise out of these things uh, shows kind of how it's like almost a newer, younger, I don't want to say generation, but like a newer, younger group of people coming in to fish relative to like their game age. But I definitely have a few times pointed out, oh, if you think this is wild, this is what it should have been like in Endwalker. Because Endwalker, I think, was very quiet compared to Dawn Trail, and Dawn Trail fishing has been miles ahead of what we've been seeing with Endwalker.
I think Endwalker is, I don't know, like the average start time of people who play or whatever, but yeah, given that you're if we're assuming, a fair amount of people are new or getting into fishing, like Endwalker was over 2 years ago. So, by your perspective, if you started fishing in Endwalker, you might not consider yourself new at it. But
Mm.
if your experience of big fishing when you are caught up, let's say, and Endwalker is your first experience. Yeah, a lot of what is happening in Dawn Trail is strange, but it's because it's because Endwalker was strange.
Yeah, it's not that Dawn Trails. It's the comparison. So like if you did Discovery in Shadowbringers, which I want to kind of leave a marker of when we talk about Discovery period, at least I've kind of broken it down into modern Discovery and pre-modern Discovery, and Shadowbringers is that cut, like that break point where during Shadowbringers is when you took over with how we do Discovery now, and organized it and orchestrated it into a very efficient and precise way of finding these fish. um, if you never did that and you started in Endwalker, or you didn't participate in Discovery, at least in Shadowbringers, and only did it in Endwalker, yeah, this is going to look wild to you. But for everybody else, this is kind of what we were hoping for previously with Endwalker, and we didn't get it. Yeah, so yeah, go ahead.
I think that is, I don't know, I think that is something that, like, if people are capable of keeping that in mind, I think you really should, because, for example, if you started in Endwalker and now you're fishing now, eventually at some point, you'll be in 8.0, 9.0, whatever, and this will be, another collective expansion of fish. And like, to, I guess, jump ahead slightly, like, a lot of people are like, well, this patch, like, the downtime of half the fish is unacceptable, or I don't like it, or it's high, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be true, but at a certain point, for most people potentially who do big fishing in the game, or at least most people in the future, that it will just be one of the four fish from this patch that have notable downtimes will be four of the hundreds of big fish in the game.
And even now, I mean, there's still four of the hundreds of big fish in the game. They stand out now because they're new.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about those in a bit. There's a handful of what we call downtime fish in this patch, and we'll get to those. Uh, well, when we get to them, we'll get to them. But the last thing I wanted to touch on was, or at least the one thing I wanted to point out. Maybe it's not the last thing, but the one thing I want to point out is the time. This in my I hadn't noticed it until this patch. Somebody When somebody pointed it out that based on the time, none of the fish overlap. If you look
Yep.
purely at time. So I'm looking at the discovery tracking sheet right now. It's like 16 to 18, 8 to 12, 4 to 6, 0 to 2, 20 to 22, 12 to 16, 2 to 4, and 22 to 0. There is no overlap in big fish times, and apparently this was the same case in 7.3 and
It
7.2.
was it was almost the case. There was one exception, but yeah, for some reason, I I personally think this is very negative. I do not understand this decision at all. Well, like I suppose logically I can understand it. Like, for instance, before Purse of Riches got found, I made a joke where it's like, oh yeah, it's going to be in what ended up being its known condition, and I also correctly got the time
You
slot
correctly got
because
the time slot. I remember that.
there was only two time slots to reasonably guess given this distribution, and it is nice, quote unquote, in a way, if when you're fishing within the patch, it is conceivably nice because, oh, there's no overlap. But there are other mechanisms at play that prevent the overlap anyway, even if the time is the same. It is very strange. And it is similar to the problem that we have with bait for the purpose of discovery, where it, regardless of like what ends up being true, you need to test everything that is possible, that is reasonably viable. And if we continue having time like this, there will still be, oh, well, I don't think it's going to be this time because there is a fish at this time. Okay, I don't care. It is possible, so we still have to test it.
Yeah.
And it helps develop a sentiment that I think is negative, but also fishing experientially, I think is very boring, but that is another factor. It
Yeah.
is very strange.
I'm trying to bring up because I made some guesses as well. And I want to say I didn't make any time guesses, but I think I got purse slightly right with it being like I think I was just offhand was like it's probably going to have like a rain or a cloud involvement, not realizing that it would be all like
That's the whole point.
exclusively that was it. That was all of it. And we'll get to purse later. Uh but yeah, no, it was really, really weird to see that. And I think, like you said, logically makes total sense because you want to have everything look nice and clean. But um, it is strange because usually they would have overlap, and that's what we've seen before. So, uh, yeah, um, yeah, that's weird. One thing that the chat's pointing out as well is we did have a lot more red maggot fish. But
We sure did.
we did see that broken a little bit, and we'll get to those fish in a moment. Um, I mean, is there anything else that stood out from the person who was orchestrating the discovery? Was there anything else that kind of stood out in terms of finding the fish, or even just uh, the fish themselves? Because you've been staring at those sheets way more than anyone else. What is there anything else that really just stands out?
The So there's a few things. I won't get into bait because we will have reasons to get into bait later, but with weather and time conditions, there's some trends with both. I know people were also joking this patch about how Fisher Dev can only count to 2 or 4, and there is a reason for that. For uh, specifically just Dawn Trail, 47% of the fish have 2-hour windows. 38% have 4-hour windows. One fish has a 6-hour window, and 4 are not timed. So that's 3 and 12% respectively. And
So what I'm hearing is Fisher Dev is a raider.
essentially, we're ostensibly raiding when we're fishing now.
Oh no, we got limit cut.
And it is like, so the untimed fish are a good example, and these percentages are not completely fair because obviously we still have 8 big fish and 6 legendaries, but I think at this point, there is no way in which the disparity like equalizes. So, for instance, right now we have 12.5% of Dawntrail big fish are not timed. And in Endwalker, that was only 17.5%. Shadowbringers, it was 20%. Stormblood, it was 42%. And if you go Heaven's Ward and A Realm Reborn, it's even more. And I feel like I'm an enjoyer of small window fish generally. I think they're good, but at this point, I would like larger ones. I would like more.
Well,
So
and
I've come to that realization this expansion.
I have, yeah, I have notes on some fish down the road where I'm just like, this is a fine 2 hour fish, but it would be better if it was 4 or 6 hours.
It
Um,
is strange. I don't know what. I'm very curious what informs this decision because I have certain. Like, I find it curious that, for instance, after it became impossible to data mine, therefore predetermine the weather and time flags, the quantity of any time and any weather fish has decreased. And I am incredibly curious, and we'll never know if this is intentional because it seems merciful, which I don't buy. And also I don't like, but I mean, that's subjective, but it is interesting because I don't know, I mean, it's the easiest way to put 8 fish, in a
in a
24-hour
hour
time block
period,
and have
yeah.
no overlap is to make all of the windows small. But
Yeah, there
it is an interesting choice, and I'm very curious if in 8.0 we will see the same.
yeah, I'm also just interested to see if we'll see that moving forward because usually when we get fish, for those who aren't aware, um, typically fish over an expansion don't necessarily get, I don't want to use the term harder, but they get a little bit more, what's the word? Intricate, I think might be the better way to put it. Or like, I don't want to say, or maybe not even necessarily involved, but they become like finer. So like if you look at like a 7.1 fish, its window is going to be like anytime it's cloudy. Or in like 7.4, 7.5, it'll be like, instead of, oh, it's not cloudy, it's intuition during clouds after fair skies between, like 5 and 6 a.m. It's like that's kind of how it is. They get their windows get a little bit more smaller, I guess might be the best way to put it. Um
Someone said sophisticated. I think
Sophisticated,
that
yeah, would be the good word.
piece.
Yeah, sophisticated would be the good word. They all get bow ties by the end of the expansion. Um and so seeing smaller windows this late in the expansion to me makes some sense, but the fact that they don't overlap and there are so many of them does raise some eyebrows. Um, and I think, broadly speaking, I think the 7.4 fish are almost all of them are, in my opinion, like A or S tier fish. Like they're all very, very high tier fish. Um, a few exceptions, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that when we're done talking about just the broad strokes. Um, but the other thing too that was interesting, and I thought this was kind of funny, was patch 7.4 was called Into the Mists, and every single fish in 7.4 is somehow related to inclement weather. Either it be clouds, rain, or fog. It is involved somehow, with only one having fair skies as its, you know, as part of its weather condition. Everything else is just rain or fog. And I thought that,
And the one that has fair skies is in Heritage Found as well. And if you've never paid attention to the weather in Heritage Found, go into it when it's fair skies and tell me what it looks like.
I don't know if it looks the same. You can barely
Hmm.
tell. So we'll get into that too, but I just thought that was, I don't, I'm not going to subscribe to the conspiracy that that was intentional, but it is
No,
a
it
really funny comparison.
it is noticeable, and it reminds me because, for instance, when people are like, "Oh, well, what about like the fish guide for this says this, the fish guide for this says that," and yes, you can point to like, okay, well, look at Moon Gripper, available from noon to 1400. Look at
Yeah.
Moonlight Guppy. But if you go to a rum reborn and you look at the fish guide information for the fish guide does just say, yeah, this is this fish likes this weather for some of them. And
Hmm.
it reminds me of that.
It does.
And
It's
I think it's cute.
I think it's fun. I There's been a lot of talk too about wanting, as I just continue to take the train off the rails here. Um, there's been a lot of talk about getting something equivalent to like the Hunt Master for fish. So you have like a slight hint as to where to go. And I don't personally really want that. I think that might, I think it's kind of fun just to let the community figure it out without having any sort of assistance. But if they're like, oh, let's give all the fish a theme for the patch, and in this case it would be, Into the Mists, that would, I might be okay with that. I think it would be kind of interesting if the fish have like a theme tied to them somehow. Um, and this would be kind of how I'd want them to see it done.
Like I think it is interesting, and I mean I don't think we will ever be capable of, judging the intentionality of something like that. But regardless, from the player perspective, it is noticeable because it was commented on by multiple people. And regardless of the intention behind it or not, it is interesting that this patch in particular has a bunch of relevant weatherfish who are all very polite and don't like encroaching on each other's space.
it Yeah, no, it's really, I'll be interested to see if we see that happen again in 7.5, especially when, windows can sometimes shrink farther into the expansion we get. And I'll definitely be interested to see, like, do they somehow do that with the legendaries? Because I don't think, I'm trying to think of like the Endwalker legendaries. I don't think overlapped, but also their windows were very small. Because I lied. I think Lopoceros and Sidereal Whale can overlap, but they never can because the weather can never coexist. If I have that, if I'm remembering the weather stacks correctly.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll be interested to see if they do that again moving forward. But yeah, so there's a lot to talk about with the 7.4 big fish, and should we just get into the first one?
Sure.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add on before we move in?
No, because I think that the first one selected is actually a very good example of both a small window fish that is not complicated, but for what it is a very good example of a small window guy that is a straight catch.
Okay, so we are obviously talking about Shuckfin Dace, caught in Coaxage. I hopefully got that right. It is caught. It has a weather condition of rain between 4 to 6 a.m. It is caught off of the anticipated red maggots that everyone loves. And it is a long bite. Right now we have it between 20 and 26 seconds. Coaxage was a fishing hole that we've seen action in before because that's where the or purple palette is for lemon chrome aether sand. I don't remember what the name of that one was, and it's also a powerful hookset fish amongst many of the other ones as well. And it is the large version of corn dace as well. That was the last thing I need to put in because I need to plant that seed because I'm going to make a joke later. But what are your thoughts on this little guy to get us started?
I feel like, uh, and uh, so I had a similar thought to this while I was thinking about the fish that required the lure earlier. Like this is a good example of, for lack of a better term, and a more end game for the expansion type of fish, which is a straightforward weather condition, small window. It is up. I think it's up 4 times in the next 24 hours or something like that. So
Yeah, its uptime is 1.1%. With as of recording, it's up. Yeah, it has 4 windows tomorrow alone throughout the day. They're all about, an average of, we'll say, 8 hours apart, 6 hours
the,
apart.
for what it is, I think it is pretty decent. I know some people like the scenery, which I mean, I would agree, but I try not to factor this into the
You don't like wind noise
judgment.
from waterfalls?
But for what it is, I think it is actually quite good. And given what else is also in the patch, I think it also stands out. Given that it does not have, because we have two intuition, a lure fish, and then two mooches. So it has one peer, and
Yeah.
compared to its peer, it is much more positively regarded, and I
Hmm.
think justifiably so. Even within its hole, it is more interesting, and that's in part due to the script fish. Also helps a lot.
Yeah, and I think with the one thing that I liked about Shuckfin was that it is, as you pointed out, very good for just a 7.4 straight catch fish with a small window because its comparison is next to Purse of Riches, and man, that bar was kind of low already. Um, but I also liked it because it so far has felt like one of those fish where you have a couple of ways of getting it, and neither of them are wrong per se. Like one is a little bit more if you want to use ambitious lure with the KP slap, you are welcome to do so, but if you don't want to do it, you're fine. It's not super common. I think it took me like 3 or 4 windows to get a first bite. I heard it go much much higher. Uh and it's not also like relative it's not super slippery. I think I had it slip once. Um but no, it feels like a pretty balanced fish for a 7.4.
Like it, I think fish like this do a good job, especially among its collective, as it were, of the entire patch. Is if you're willing to, or I guess if you're not being uncharitable, um, shows that there's intentionality even in very generally straightforward fish, and that straightforward fish are not inherently a negative, and I would argue, are necessary. And this is a very good example where a very realistic chance of failure, but the failure isn't really, uh, I don't know, less likely to be perceived as harmful because you can just try again very soon.
yeah, it's the cost of failure is relatively low. And talking about, I think I talked about this in my Purse of Riches video a few days ago, I believe it was. Um, Having that spectrum of fish, that like balance of different fish is kind of important. And I think shuckfin is a really good anchor on the still slightly rare, slightly challenging. I use that with air quotes, without being necessarily too punishing or too whatever. I didn't feel like going to Shuckfin Dace was a chore like I have with some other fish. Um, it feels very relatively well balanced.
I would I would agree, and I think that yeah, perseverance is obviously the point of comparison, and I think another decent one in terms of like as you said, you have a few ways to approach it, and both are likely, relative. You're likely to see success either way, or the rate of success between the two is not substantial. Whereas, for instance, with the lurefish that we have this patch, you need to engage in very specific behavior to
Yeah,
have success, and to maximize your chance of success you also have to do something further very specific. Whereas this, you have multiple ways of approach, and I think it is good that they continue to design some fish where there is not a perfectly prescribed method of approach, and also thanks to the window length you are not, completely sabotaging yourself if you don't show up to prepare early. Because now, since Endwalker, you can technically say, oh well, you have reason to show up every window to prepare, Angler's Art stacks. But with the shorter windows, you don't necessarily have to. And this is a very good, just general. Yep, that's a straight catch guy, and it's pretty good.
yeah, you just kind of show up and get it. And I think we've talked about preparing for fish a lot in the past, or at least I have, as a very important key part of catching a fish. But you don't have to do it for all of them. And I think Shuckfin is one where if you show up early, you get your 10 Angler's Art stacks, you will be rewarded for that. But if you don't show up 10 minutes early, get your 10 Angler's Art stacks, and you show up like a minute before the window and just grab a slap, you're not going to have a terrible time. Like you're still going to have a pretty good time with it, even if you are missing, that 450 extra GP. So it's a nice. I'll just keep saying it. It's a well balanced fish for a very simple straight catch fish. Even
Yeah.
if you look past its only comparison for this patch, compared to I think what was 7.3 straight catch fish were Gondola Lavore, Prime Adjudicator, Sprouting Perch, and Iron Shadow Tongue. Uh, I think I would probably put it right up there as like a well balanced fish compared to them as well.
I would agree.
So, but I don't think there's too much to talk about on this one because it is. I mean, it's just a good fish. Done. Thumbs up.
Good job.
Yeah, good job, Square Enix. You made a good fish. All right, so we can move on to our next one. If I can press buttons correctly. All right, Shin Snuffler. So Shin Snuffler is caught in Yachtel in ankle deep. It is caught during fog with any preceding weather, and it occupies that exclusive 0 to 2 slot that we were talking about earlier. But this one has a intuition tied to it, but it's only 3 ankle deep catfish, which is the smaller version of Shin Snuffler. Um, is there an actual? Oh yeah, no. Just Shin Snuffler is up right now for the next 5 seconds. Um, and it is also caught on red maggot, and it is also another long biting fish. Seeing an intuition fish, I think we've talked about this a little bit. At least one of our complaints in Endwalker was we didn't really get any common intuition fish until Maya Man. And even then, it took a few expansions, I think, before we got that again. And then come Dawn Trail, we're at least let me think, like 2 or 3 deep in terms
We have
of
3 now.
intuition. Yeah, this would be the third because it's what Giga Giant Snakehead, Shin Snuffler, and then what was the last one that I'm forgetting?
The Carp and Living Memory. Also Dispatch.
Oh, right, Esperance Carp. Duh. That's why I couldn't find it. I was looking at all the 7.3 and 7.2 fish. Um, so yeah, Shin Snuffler. I want to say that this one, if we compare, just straight catch to our fish from 7.4 compared to Shuckfin Dace, I actually don't know if I like Shin Snuffler as much.
I with this in particular, well no, honestly, both Intuition Fish Dispatch, I personally feel like I very much have to restrain myself because I am desperately trying to uh wait until the expansion is over to fully form a judgment. And the reason for this is purely due to the way the lore required big fish have been introduced.
Mm-hmm.
However, lore is a new mechanic. So introducing it, which I will explain why I think the lore fish are all very acceptable and actually quite decent when we get to the other one in living memory. But
Mm-hmm.
intuition is a mechanic that has existed since A Realm Reborn.
Mm-hmm.
And at level 100, you should not need this like piecemeal introduction of intuition as a mechanic. Which for instance, prior to Dantra, which has introduced effectively 3 Cinder Surprises. Cinder Surprise is the only big fish that I considered bad, and it is due to the way its intuition functions
Mm-hmm.
are essentially does not. And
It acts. I mean, I think with Esperance Carp, Shin Snuffler, um, and Cinder, I may even bundle in Giga Giant for this. They just feel like that extra an extra step that you need to take that doesn't
yes,
necessarily add anything to the experience of catching the fish. Uh,
and with
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, continue.
No, oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
With Cinder Surprise, it is. I find it funny because Dantra has effectively like almost like whitewashed Cinder Surprised in some way for me because Cinder Surprise, as a function of its time, well, that was the incentive to get you to show up early. Whereas now, you, if you want, have incentive to show up early for any fish because Angler's Art Stacks exist. It did not exist when Cinder Surprise was added. Now you've added these 3 other intuition fish where the Angler's Art Stacks still exist, but also you have to show up early to catch whatever you need. With the carp, at least, there's a degree of optimization, and sure, you can say what's in the surprise. There's a degree of optimization, but as I've said many times, I do not respect it, and I refused to ever show up more than 10 minutes early. And I, it is the same for this fish, essentially, where you know, it is French shaped, and that is carrying it immensely. I think in the perspective of players, which
As
fine.
was pointed out, its face.
It
It is very much a friend shaped fish.
it it is a good icon, also good name, along with the fish guide entry and the depth of water in the fishing hole. Like experientially, this is a very good fish.
It is a good I'll talk about this a little bit more later too. It is a very good world building fish.
Yes, it is. It excels immensely at that, and that is carrying it immensely, in
Yeah, good
my
flavor.
opinion.
It has good flavor. I think that's the way that it should be put.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that like lures, you can forgive the introduction of lures if for the big fish if they're an issue for you, but with the intuition, we got the intuition refresh mechanic this expansion, and then the first intuition we get is the exact length
Yeah.
of the window, and then
And
the next two we get are not technically.
yeah, so we had Giga Giant Snakehead, which its intuition will cover the entirety of its window, uh, start to finish. Shin Snuffler and Esperance Carp, who we will talk about towards the end, they have short windows for their 2 hour time slots, which to me read as a design choice of you can cast out when the window opens and still get the full intuition time compared to what we typically would see is where you cast out a little bit early and to maximize your time. You would cast out a little early so intuition triggered right when the window opens. Um that's how I've been reading it. And I think intuition for this I'm trying to figure out I have a lot of things I want to say. I'm trying to figure out how to say them correctly. Um okay. I think this and Esperance Carp both, and I'll talk about this again. With intuition, you only have a certain amount of time for that fish to be caught. And if that certain amount of time is the length of the window, then there's no real optimization, no thought that really needs to go into it. It's just a check mark. That's what you were kind of saying with Cinder Surprise. I agree with what you were saying on Cinder. I think that it is hard for me to respect Cinder Surprise, not because it is just a rare slipping fish, but because it is just boring in that sense.
It, like I I
Yeah, I think about
but
that. I think
especially
about that
with
too.
especially with the intuitions from uh Endwalker are all relatively decent. Basilosaurus or well
Garlic
like
Ichthys. Yeah, Garlic Ichthys
int-
was pretty good. I liked
like
Maya
there
Man.
yes, Maya Man was like okay, wow, a fantastic, immediate, well,
Ret-
immediate quote unquote, but it was the next intuition to proceed all of the Endwalker ones, or sorry, Shadowbringers ones,
yeah,
and the legendaries lived up to it.
because Maya Man was the first intuition non-legendary fish we have had since uh
Since the Realm Reborn.
Realm Reborn, yeah, with Cornelia. Uh and I think it did it well. And I think what Maya Man did was the intuition was smaller than the window. And this is what I think the intuitions for Dawn Trail have been lacking, is because they all match the entire length of the window. Shin Snuffler would be way more interesting if I didn't, if intuition just wasn't a thing that I could check off and like, cool, I'm done. If I had to either find a way to re-optimize, my GP, because how could I get a second intuition to maximize my time? Or how can I engage with that mechanic that we got at level 50 with Fisherman's Instinct? How could we engage with that as well? And so I think with Shin Snuffler and with Esperance Carp too, and I'll probably go a little bit deeper into Esperance when we get there, these fish could have been, I would have found them more interesting if their windows were like twice as long or their intuitions were like a fifth of the length. I love going for sea butterfly. I love going for snowy paraxis because they're short windows and you can get multiple intuition per window. And one of the things I'll keep saying is bring back the Heaven's Ward era legendary fish because those are in my opinion the best example of how you make interesting intuition fish, and I think you can do that without necessarily making them legendary as well. Um,
Yeah,
so I think Shin Snuffler, if they wanted to keep that 0 to 2 window, break it down into like a 1 minute like make it a 1 minute intuition like sea butterfly, and make it like an easier to get sea butterfly. Like that could have been really interesting. There could have been a ton of fun using the lures, using GP, like managing your GP. That could have made it a whole lot more interesting for this type of fish in this fishing hole specifically.
I think after it was caught, I think I joked, just cut off one of the zeros and make the intuition 50 seconds, and it is an exponentially better fish if you just do that. Where I I don't even it is among its collective where I really find a substantial disagreement where I but also I suppose you can say, well, eventually all of the big fish are going, they're going to be a collective experience for somebody, but I don't know. I think they, for the most part, have done a pretty good job with intuitions functioning in some sort of unique way. I think if you enjoy fishing as an actual job and not just, a checklist, by far the most intelligent use of it is Heaven's Ward Legendary style,
Yeah.
where you are able to either approach it multiple ways, or you can even see in the way that the Heaven's Ward Legendaries have aged. The reason why they have aged well is you went for instance, in the case of Sea Butterfly, you in Heaven's Ward, you got one intuition, and if you got a second, you were lucky. And into now, you precisely have a set pattern of behavior to do in order to execute getting exactly this many. And once they added double hook, there was, I did a lot of like testing in Clearpool to determine, what time is acceptable to blind double hook in order to maximize cherry Bennett intuitions. There's a lot of optimizing that comes with that, which I don't think is necessary for intuition to be a compelling mechanic, especially with the refresh mechanic. And
Mm-hmm.
they have done a fairly good job with the existing intuitions from Win that already existed at the beginning of Dawn Trail. And the refresh rates or whatnot. But even though the trait is level 50, we got it in Dawn Trail, so it is very strange that we have 3 intuition fish added, and the intuition refresh exists for all of them,
But
but
they weren't. They
is
don't
completely
necessarily.
pointless.
Yeah, they don't really engage with them in any way.
Like, if you
And
proc early, I guess.
yeah, if you proc early, if you what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, 'cause I have spent, yeah, I know you have spent a lot of time at Charbonnet. I spent a lot of time at Charbonnet's sibling, Sea Butterfly. Optimizing, figuring out the timing with uh, maximizing intuitions and fully utilizing, all the skills that we have. But this is also, God, like, gosh, this is like what, 9 years, 10 years after they were added. And so, because of how they were originally put in, there was room for expansion and room for optimization. And right now, with what we know and what we understand and what we are seeing and what we expect from Fisher moving forward, excuse me, there isn't much room for that level of optimization again with fish like Shin Snuffler. It's because unless they do some, I guess the one thing that I could see where the refresh rate would come into handy and where it could be interesting is in, oh gosh, what would it be, 9.0, when Fish Eyes becomes available to use with Shin Snuffler. Then it becomes a completely different fish. Because now you have a 5 minute intuition, but you only have 1 minute of Fish Eyes, and you have all of that for a 23-minute weather window minimum. That becomes a much more interesting fish. So I think in however many years it's going to be, probably 4 years, Shin Snuffler might actually become a really interesting fish. But right now, in the moment, we're not really seeing that engagement of the mechanics that we were given in Dawn Trail.
And the like that thought process is why in 7.3 I I was like, well, yes, Giga Giant Snakehead is not a compelling fish, but it is a fantastic fish eyes candidate in the future, and it is basically identical to Shin Snuffler in the way in that it is a single weather 2 hour window. Intuition is slightly longer, but intuition is essentially as easy to proc and refresh. So it is a very it is not in itself entirely disagreeable. And my issue with the Dawn Trail intuition fish, I am attempting to restrain until the expansion is over because it's not over yet. We have
We still have
what
14 more
14
fish.
fish to get.
Yeah, we have 14 big fish to get at least.
So I am willing, but I think if in 7.5, if we have another intuition fish and the refresh does not matter, I will be very confused. And I would not be surprised if this is the case. But
Yeah,
it's like, why?
I think. Well, I think one of the things that we thought about early on, like when we were talking just about Dawn Trail at the start, and like what we were expecting when we just got these new skills and traits. One of the things that came up was Fisherman's Instinct or Fisher's Instinct isn't meant to be a primary mechanic. It's meant to be a quality of life
Yeah.
for those, for folks who don't necessarily want to deal with re-optimizing multiple intuition. But then at that same point, if it was meant to be a quality of life thing to make it easier to handle, multi intuition windows, why don't we see more multi intuition windows? like,
Yeah.
like why is that not there? Um, so I'm still up in the air on if I consider Fisherman's Instinct as a core mechanic or if it's just like a quality of life trait. I think it's interesting how it's been implemented, and I think it's interesting how it works. And I'm kind of with you where I'm trying to hold back as much judgment as I can on Dawn Trail fish until the very end. Um, I have plans, on how I want to do that, and I'll probably be able like I want to get like a round table together of a bunch of us to just talk about what we thought. Um, but I'm trying to hold on to that endpoint to be like, okay, we're not done. They haven't used it yet, but they also surprised that like they surprised us in Endwalker with the legendary, so maybe they'll surprise us again in Dawn Trail. Who knows? But yeah, we'll wait and see how that goes.
Uh, as you said, I cannot begrudge them, and I think it is incredibly, genuinely very admirable that they clearly think when they add new mechanics about how it impacts older fish and effectively nerfs older fish without, completely neutering all of them. That's very intelligent, and I enjoy that a lot. But it is very uh, to explain to somebody, in contemporary times, well, these intuitions will be interesting in 4 years. Okay.
This fish, Shin Snuffler, will age like fine wine. It'll be
In
great.
9.0?
In 9.0,
Wow.
I promise you, Shin Snuffler is going to be great. You just got to bear with me for, another 7 patches. Uh, yeah, no, I think I'll probably mention this again with some of the other fish too, but I think, yeah, I think my main points with Shin Snuffler, either shorter intuition or a longer window, would have made this fish much higher on my own, kind of on my own rating scale of where I put fish kind of mentally.
Yeah, I do admire it for getting hard carried by its flavor because I feel like it is
Yeah.
viewed positively by people at large, and it is purely off of its flavor.
Snuffler is such a soft sounding name. If it was like ankle biter or something like, actually ankle biter probably would have landed better than Shin Snuffler even. Um, but like, because it's based off an ankle deep catfish, like knee deep catfish doesn't really sound as nice. But Shin Snuffler, that's just a soft sounding name. It's very fun. Um, and I do like that too when it comes with fish. Sometimes I just think that there needs to be a soft and lore friendly flavor fish. Doesn't have to be a great experience, but I think Shin Snuffler, to your point, is really carried by the fact that it's just a fun fish in general. It looks fun, it sounds fun, its lore is fun. Um, I think that there is value in that fish.
No, I think it is. It's very good. It's similar to how, people of a certain enlightened mindset have a very positive association with Moon Gripper when it is generally not very remarkable, but it is very appealing to people of a certain mindset. If you find the little black crab compelling visually,
I just
and
whenever someone
it works out.
whenever someone says Moon Gripper, I think of the song Moon River, except they're just singing that song in my head. But yeah, no, I don't yeah, I'm just trying to think. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that that's fine, but I definitely agree that I think that carries the fish in a like holistic view. If you're when you're looking at everything, it does get carried a lot by the fact that it is cute and
It
funny.
is I would say, a good showcase, similar to, like, I know I've said a million times whenever legendaries come up in the fishing Discord. In my opinion, it is substantially much more important that they are novel, and novel does not mean hard. And
Yeah,
this is novel. This is a novel thing about it.
and
It
I'm
does not
gonna
impact fishing for it, but it is novel.
and I'm gonna say this now because I know it's going to come up in the comments and it's going to happen multiple times. Fish, like Square Enix doesn't want people not fishing. They're going to make fish that are going to be, interesting and approachable. And so if this is one of their ways of doing that, I'm okay with that. Having, like one or two cute little plushy fish every other expansion. Seeing in chat,
Uh,
some people
what
have just like a bunch in their inventory because they're cute.
Yeah, see, yeah, it's your favorite, and it's been in your inventory since you caught it. In 7.0, it was the same thing with I don't remember the thing in the the meme one.
Oh, all right, all right, all right.
Yes,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, that.
There's a lot of hope riding because we haven't gotten a big fish for is that Cheogar Lake?
Yeah,
Um, we haven't gotten a big fish for Cheogar Lake yet, which is where all right, all right, all right is, and it is a unique looking fish, which makes it a prime candidate for a big fish. So there is a chance that we get a big fish version of all right, all right, all right.
to give the all right, hopers some more hope. The vegetarian is the big fish in its hole, and it was the FanFest fish. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
perhaps we will, go in the opposite direction, and the FanFest fish will receive a big fish. I don't really. I have escaped whatever. Like, I don't understand the origins or understand the appreciation for it, but I understand there's an immense appreciation for it. So for
It's
everybody who enjoys it,
yeah,
I hope you get it.
I don't think it's the fish itself. I think it's that model in I was corrected. It's not Sweden. I think it was Finland. I think it's it's one of the Nordic alliance countries has a model of a Saccharomyces, and that's what everyone finds lovely and adorable, and that's why it was so loved, I think. But a big fish version of it would just absolutely be hilarious, and I really hope that it is something fun. because that would
Like,
be that would be great. That would be one of those great fish for introducing people into fishing.
yeah, I think fish like that theoretically, or even Shin Snuffler or anything else that, people might find enjoyable, fun, cute for whatever reason. It is a very good way to be like, look at this thing that you can get.
Hold it. It's cute. It's fun. But so shall we move on to the next one? We've already been talking for
Yeah.
like an hour and we've only gotten through two fish. All right. I forget which one's next.
Yes. Uh,
Ah, okay, that's right. We just jump over a little bit. We stay in Yachtel and we go to the Moxutural Greatgar. This is also caught in Yachtel, but it is caught in Cenote Moxutural, and it is caught during rain from 20 to 22 or 8 to 10 p.m. And it is a mooch off of checkered cichlids. This is one of the first fish where technically red maggot wasn't the bait, which was a nice change of pace. But it was otherwise, it's a long bite. Checkered cichlid is also a mooch loop as well, which we haven't gotten we don't get a ton of those.
and then Dawn Trail in particular, I think it's a good, uh, I think it is, compared to every other mooch in Dawn Trail, I think this is the most agreeable one in that it is the easiest. So I
Yeah.
think it is good to have it. Interesting that it is introduced now, but I think it's good that it's introduced now because I like the spread of the previous mooch fish that Dontrell has added. So it's interesting that, especially because I think the other mooch from this patch is probably the most contentious one. So
Yes, yes, and then that one I that one's coming up. I think in two more fish. I think I threw that guy in the middle.
so this one also being here to be like, well, look at this relaxing mooching experience you can have. It's decent.
It's
It is a good execution.
I think Moxutural Greatgar is a good example of something that bugs me with the Dawn Trail fishing holes. And that is the fact that they are all balanced with their bites.
Yep.
Uh, so for those for those who are like maybe just tuning in because you're interested, when we think about, or at least when I think about fish design, I'm not just thinking about the fish itself and what I need to do to catch that fish. I'm also thinking about the fishing hole because the fishing hole has as much, if not more, of an impact on your strategy than how the fish itself is caught. Now, with Dawn Trail and the addition of Modest and Ambitious Lure, what we now have is an ability to sway certain bites in our way. And all of the Dawn Trail fishing holes are, I shouldn't say all, many of the Dawn Trail fishing holes are four fish. There's just four fish, and two of them are precision hook set, two of them are powerful hook sets. So in the case of Moxutural Greatgar, we saw this with Lottle and Waiting, uh, Stardust Sleeper, Chain Shark by proxy. What was the other one? Muttering Matamata. And I think that was it. Um, if you slap one of the fish of the target hook set that you want, you can basically guarantee that the next bite or the bite after that is going to be the target of the fish that is going to be the fish that you want to mooch. And so we don't we don't really get some of the interesting timing mechanics. And sorry for the cat noises in the background. She's now getting fed. Um, but because of this split, because they're balanced 50-50 in terms of not necessarily bite rates, but in terms of, number of precision hook set fish versus number of powerful hook set fish, you can basically force these mooches in. So with Moxutural Greatgar, with enough GP, you can basically maintain a very high mooching, mooch uptime. And because it is also a mooch loop, you aren't needing to mooch as much. I think many of the times that I have gone fishing for Moxutural Greatgar, I have prepped 4 checkered cichlids, and I have done it so very quickly because I was able to use modest lure and basically just force the bites. And I don't have to get them again because those 4 basically last the entirety of the short window, the 2 hour window. So it just gets, I don't know, I'm trying to come to the point of like what's bugging me, and I haven't really put it into words, and I will by the end of the expansion. But the fact that we have balanced hook sets or balanced hook set fishing holes removes the need to have to think about timing, and it removes the need to have to think about uh, chance of what is biting and what is not. And that was a little bit of a detractor from me. It kind of just makes it very prescriptive rather than something that you actually have to figure out and think. Like every window for me from Moxutural Greatgar felt the same compared to another fish we'll talk about, like Punuity Pain, where every window feels different, and that's great.
I think that I think well, I said it is it's decent, and what it's decent, but it is, I think, a fish specifically with the conditions that it has is limited to being at best decent, because if you pay attention to the fishing hole in any way whatsoever, which is its fishing hole is demonstrative of most down trail fishing holes.
Yeah.
It is that it that is the only way that a fish like this in most places can be implemented here. And okay, it's here once, fine, but
This is the fourth mooch fish in a fishing hole like this, because we've had Stardust Sleeper, Lottle in Waiting, and Muttering Matamata are all in similar situations.
yeah, and it's easier than all of those. Like, you can tell it's the most agreeable mooch fish of the expansion because it's the only one that people don't complain about. So that's fine.
Another serious metric that we use for determining fish is how often is it complained about. Um, Anyways, continue. Sorry.
It's it's I don't know. I feel like it's very good, and I think this is also part of why it is decent that it exists, because it helps kind of, if if you're an individual who cares a lot about fishing and you're talking to people who are not as deeply invested as you, it can be more difficult to get a point across. But this is something very decent to point at and be like, but do you see, like, it directly demonstrates the limitations of, like, more than simply the mechanics of fishing. Like, the hole itself, the composition of the hole itself is holding it back from being more interesting than it could potentially be, and demonstrates the quote unquote problem with
With the
something like
balance of
that.
fishing holes. Yeah. I think Amiak brings up though a good point that I didn't get to that is worth noting though is even though the fishing holes are balanced, the bite rates aren't. And you still have to expend a good amount of GP to make that work. So there is more GP maintenance. But with tools like Angler's Art Stacks with makeshift bait, you kind of remove that. And so I think it's good that we're seeing more use of GP skills. I think I will say I use surface slap quite often for Moxutural Greatgar, and you could in theory also use the Spareful Hand identical cast trick to grab more quickly, more checkered cichlids quickly, and that's another 450 minimum GP cost. But because we have so many tools to mitigate GP use right now, I don't feel like it's as impactful as it could be. I think Moxutural Greatgar compared to, say, Lottle in Waiting is a little bit weaker, as in Greatgar is a little weaker. Because with Lottle in Waiting, that's not a mooch loop. Mooch loops are great for GP management because you don't have to, if you are not, if you're in a loop, you're either using makeshift bait, which is not going to cost you any GP, so you're just going to be regaining GP the whole time, or you're using Patience 2, which means you're building back Angler's Art Stack, so you're going to be able to store GP for later. That's great. But when you don't have a mooch loop, then you're going to be expending more GP. So I think Moxutural Greatgar, in my opinion, should have swapped with Lottle and Waiting. I think Lottle and Waiting would have been a much better 7.4 fish than a 7.3. And Moxutural Greatgar, if that was like 7.3 fish, I would have been like, this fits. This fits as a 7.3 fish. In terms of, the skills and the management that you have to have. But compared to its other mooches in this expansion as well, and just in general, it does kind of stand back. I kind of rambled through that, I think, but carry on.
I think as well it would well, I don't know, because I think Lottle on Waiting strongly benefits from its very specific time condition, but I think that Moxutural Greatgar would have also benefited from the window being 4 hours instead of two,
Yeah.
which they could have done without introducing overlap.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that that would work. I agree with that. Is what I should be saying. I agree with that because I don't feel like I'm using. I don't need to get more checkered cichlids than usual. And I should say this might also just be because I run with a high GP build. Um, I don't feel like my GP is ever pressured, and I don't feel like I ever need to get more than the initial 4 checkered cichlids that I have. There are cases when I do, and then things are a little more fun. But typically, those 4 checkered cichlids will last the entirety of that 2-hour window because they'll just keep mooching into each other, and their slip rate isn't that high, which is something else that we could have seen. Um, and so it just felt like you show up, you get cichlids, then you're done when you're done with the cichlids, and it just
It
kind of was
is.
a little weak.
I find it very interesting, and this is the only mooching fish and dawn trial where I've been in this situation where the window ends and I feel like okay, well, I'm picking myself up and leaving and, dropping either like my fish on the floor or I still have a lot of GP. And it feels very strange. It feels,
Yeah,
when the window ends, it often feels like it should not be over.
yeah. This is going back to something you said before, where it's like you don't show up, more than 10 minutes before a window. Moxutural Greatgar is like one of those fish that I feel like I could show up, like 2-3 minutes before the window, just catch a couple of checkered cichlids, and be fine. And I don't feel like that would, if anything, that might actually make the fish more interesting. Um, but yeah, no, there's definitely a lot left literally on the floor when the window is done that just feels very off to me. Um,
I do think it is decent to have, just because I strongly am of the opinion, especially with the other mooch this patch, that mooching is very much, especially with the current kit, a skill check. I think a lot of people do not like hearing that and probably don't like hearing that, essentially, skill issue when it
Sorry
comes to
guys, fishing has
fishing.
fishing has skill. Sorry.
But I think this is a very good fish for people who do not want to have to deal with that because you can show up early, you can swim bait, you can do everything, and then that's when you leave the window with you stand up, or well, if you're sitting, you exit fishing stance, you drop your remaining swim bait on the floor, you still have like 800 GP, whatever, or you don't prep early, either because you don't know that that is an option or whatever, and you still have a pretty good chance at catching it. Like Moxutural Greatgar was the first fish of the patch that I caught. And, while I'm managing the sheet and whatnot, I do not have time to show up to prep anything. So I just showed up and was like, okay, well, thank you. Leave.
Yeah.
Uh, and none of the other mooch fish, it was nearly as straightforward. So I think it is good that it exists in a climate where uh, every other mooch fish is regarded by at least some portion of players as, notably troublesome. So it is good that it
Yeah.
exists, but its placement is interesting.
Yeah. Like I said, I definitely feel like if it and Lottle swapped positions and patches, it would feel a little bit better. I think Lottle, I don't think Lottle is an amazing 7.4 fish, but it definitely seemed a little bit higher on what I was expecting out of a 7.3. Um, but yeah, I was looking back at my guides. Moxutural Greatgar was actually the third guide I did, and I think part of that was because I kept missing windows due to work. But do you remember what the first big fish found for 7.4 was? I don't think it was Greatgar. I think Greatgar was second or third.
Tell you. The order was the first one was Shin Snuffler, then Shuckfin Dace, then Punuity Pain, then Greatgar.
Okay, okay. That's right. I feel like the Punity Pain was a stroke of luck on that point.
It was.
We got lucky on that one. Um, so okay, cool. I forgot if it was. I knew it was relatively quick. I just didn't remember how quick. But
It was the last one before the 3-day gap.
the gap, yeah. It was in the first pack. And then the gap after that was Esperance Carp and Goldgrouper? No, Goldgrouper
Uh,
and then Esperance Carp.
it was after Moxutural Greatgar, and it was I don't know how you say the lore one.
Oh,
Elevator.
Datnioides Aeroplanos.
That one.
Thank you. Just
That one, and
Datnoi.
then Gold Grouper, and then 4 more days for the carp, and then all the other days for
And then another eternity
the other
for Purse of Riches. Oh boy. Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember. I should have checked that before going into this conversation. But no, that makes sense, and that I'm remembering this now in that order. Um, but yeah, no, I think Greatgar. When I think of like when I think of fish two, I think of a lot of times people come in and they're just like, I want to start fishing. Where do I start? And I feel like, to your point about Shin Snuffler, that's probably a good starting fish. If someone wanted to get started with, just dawn trail fish, it was their first time fishing, let's start you on content. Shin Snuffler and Moxutural Greatgar, I think, are two good starter fish. It's a little weird that they're coming in at 7.4, but they're good starter fish, I think, for more intricate or sophisticated, as we established before, uh, big fish. And I think those need to exist throughout an expansion, not just at the start. So yeah, I think that's Moxutural Greatgar. Is there anything else you want to talk about with this guy before we move on to our next one?
Nope.
Who even is next? Oh, okay. I put this guy next. Heirloom Goldgrouper. Heirloom Goldgrouper is caught in the Alexandrian ruins and heritage found. It is caught during fair skies after fog between 12 to 16 and it is caught on popper lure, which was a huge discovery that we finally.
Absolutely thrilling.
It was. I think you even made a comment about how when you were filling out the sheet during the catch window, you instinctively put red maggot because you were
Yep.
expecting it to be red maggot.
Every ping for a test, I put the bait manually, and every single time I prep the ping, I put red maggot, and then I have to backspace and put popper every single time.
Yeah.
And I
Um,
mean, this is remarkable, especially because this zone is a 50-50 chance on the bait. So
yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's
It's
foregone,
yeah.
basically.
So the one interesting thing, and this brings up a point about baits in Dawn Trail. Uh, the freshwater bait uh kind of stopped being effective after a certain point. So like golden stonefly nymph, honeybee, couldn't be used in Alexandria, but we could use popper lure and red maggot, which could also be used in the other areas as well. So that's when we say like, oh, this one's a 50-50 because it was either going to be popular or it was going to be red maggot. And if you made a bet, it was people were probably going to be betting on red maggot. So that was like the first big fun thing too about popper lure or about Heirloom Goldgrouper was it was caught on popper lure. It wasn't caught on red maggot. And I feel extremely vindicated because that's what I was testing on the whole time was popper lure. Um, it's also caught, talking about, some of the previous fish. This one has a 4 hour window and it is caught during fair skies, which is the only non inclement weather fish for, for this particular patch. Um, but yeah, no, this is, uh, there's some interesting things I want to talk about with Heirloom Goldgrouper, but I'll let you get started on this one as well.
Well, for people who don't fully grasp the importance of the bait, some a very simple context. Right now, with the 32 fish that are in Dawn Trail, 72% bite on a high tier script bait, so orange. 9.4% bite on a purple script bait, none bite on a gill bait, and 19% are mooched. And if you include the ideal bait for the mooches, it is 82% high tier, and gill increases to 90 or 19.4%.
Mm-hmm.
And to contextualize those percentages, Endwalker at the end was 47.5% of the fish bit on a high tier script bait. Now, if there are 14 more fish to be added in Dawn Trail, and if every single one does not bite on a high tier script bait, Dawn Trail will still be the expansion with the highest percentage of fish that bite on a high tier script bait. And all of the 14 remaining fish are not going to be on low tier script or gillbait. So
Yeah.
it will be overwhelming. And in Endwalker, people were still remarking on that being high, and really it was not compared to Shadowbringers. Shadowbringers and Endwalker were very similar percentage for the high tier script bait. It
Mm-hmm.
was about 50%, 48%. The low tier script bait was actually higher in Endwalker, and Mooch percent has been about the same every expansion at about 20%. Heaven's Ward was 55%, but uh, that's Heaven's Ward. But
Yeah.
it is the state of bait is, in my opinion, very dire for several reasons. Um, Mainly for testing. It genuinely slows down testing when there are fish to still be found, but then there's an adjacent window for something. But it's technically possible, but it is not likely either. given what has been ruled out or just historical trends. So it is a lower priority. I sometimes, don't ping something that I otherwise would in an ideal world because we have a limited amount of people testing and they have a limited amount of bait. And I'd rather you throw your red maggots to attempt to find something that hasn't been found than test something that we all know is not going to be viable, but we technically have to test. And that
Yeah.
is very frustrating to deal with. I think for a lot of the testers, it's just, you don't even see it because many people don't know. But then some people who, are a bit more proactive and are like, well, are you going to ping for this? I'm like, well, I would, but you see, I'd rather the red maggots go here. But it's for testing, it is very unpleasant and it's fine, that's a unique circumstance, but it
Yeah.
uh don't trust the first expansion where we've had this like tiering with the baits where Yaktail cut off one of the gill baits and then Heritage Found in Alexandria cut off both.
Yep.
And I don't.
I think I think this goes back to what we were talking about with Shin Snuffler, where I think it's a flavor thing. Because when you think about, like, historically, we've had fishing in Final Fantasy 14 is relatively uh, closely tied to the environment of the world and also parallels real world things. And I think the reason why we saw those gillbaits drop off is because they probably didn't exist at all in Alexandria. So it would have been really weird to have them be a viable bait for a zone where honeybees may not have existed or golden
If
stonefly mist
flavor
may not.
wise, I
Yeah,
do like it.
yeah. Flavor wise, it makes sense. Mechanically, I mean, technically, also, I mean, if I want to get really pedantic, technically, when you're dealing with a thing like that, fish would still go after it in real life because they're looking more at the movement and the general shape. So if it looks like an insect and is the size of the insect they want, they'll go after it. But um, it's it's really strange, and I thought originally that it was like, oh, they want to make big fishing more of like that high tier thing, so they're going to use the higher tier script. That was my original thought. Was, it's the thing you choose to do. It gives you more use to use your high tier scripts. But then they added the script mounts that, someone's pointing out in chat right now. Um, and then they added it to Cosmic Exploration. And now you can just get like stacks upon stacks of that if you're just in Cosmic. So it kind of, I don't know, it just felt really strange. And I don't know if like Cosmic was a response to people saying, "Man, I don't have enough bait for this," or what. It just was, I don't know, from my standpoint, it's just very strange to see all of these, red maggots keep getting used in environments where necessarily red maggot might not necessarily work. Um, so it's just, yeah, it's just kind of weird to see. Yeah, and even, do we want to talk about how, baits affect bite rate and how that changes the experience too? Do we want to go down that little short jaunt?
I think it's good to talk about because I feel like perhaps now we may be at a point where most of the is this is my impression anyway from many of the people testing. The people who are more experienced are just using the script bait, for the most part. They
I want to make it clear. I wasn't. I was just going with the lower tier. I was going with whatever had the lowest number.
Yeah, well, specifically, I think to start, it's like, okay, the people who, I recognize the name, it's like, okay, you're probably using the script bait, or once more people are involved, the people who are more experienced are normally like doing more of a filling thing. So, for example, with when all that was left was Purse of Riches, and every test had like
Like
at
ghost
least 10
snippers.
people on each bait. So, okay, well, most of these people actually now, the random people who are not normally here, are using Ghost Snipper because we have reached a point where people are like, okay, well, it's a big fish, it's going to bite on the high tier script bait. So that is what random people are using now. So now the coverage needs to come from the people who are more experienced who might ordinarily be using the script bait in another circumstance.
Yeah.
But when it comes to more like the beginning, when people are wherever, if somebody is fishing in, I don't know, somewhere in Kozamaga, and uh, every bait is usable, somebody reporting on the first window of the patch using gold stonefly nymph or honeybee is probably somebody who does not participate often. And I'm not saying this to denigrate anybody, because testing every bait is important.
It's not even just important, it's like required. Because
Yes,
if we just assumed red maggot, it would have taken longer to find heirloom gold grouper.
yes, and that is the almost catch-22 situation that we are in with bait, where, and I think I said this in the fishing discord before the patch, in some ways I feel stupid telling people I need every bait tested, because okay, well, the patch is over and everything that bites on a bait bites on the high tier script bait except one, but that's the thing, except one.
Yeah.
So it is necessary, and until we get to a point where bait essentially ceases to exist, and it's just, okay, this is freshwater bait, this is ocean bait, that will have to be done no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
But it is frustrating because until Endwalker, there was still, every bait was used at least once. This was the case in Shadowbringers. The jerked over is, more of a technicality because it was involved in a mooch, but every bait is relevant at least once. Every gill bait
Was
in
used at least once.
Shadowbringers. Yes, every gill bait in Shadowbringers was used for a straight catch at least once. And that is, I think, the bare minimum that should happen. And you can make an exception, for instance, with in Dawntrail, we have some biomes that have very few fishing holes. So, okay, and then also we have the gill ocean bait is limited because it cannot be used in.
Outside of ocean fishing, yeah.
So, fine. But I still think this is a fair, like, thing to meet, because for players who are just showing up and want to test and are absorbing the conversation happening around bait and people memeing about bait, uh, they digest some of it and take it perhaps, more seriously than people who are more experienced. And it is a very awkward time to, explain, okay, well, it's probably not going to be this, but doing this probably pointless thing is still very important.
Yeah.
Is much more of a harder thing to sell people who you are already asking to probably waste their time.
Yeah.
So you're like you're time wasting maxing, basically.
It really is hey, can you go and use Popper Lure at Heirloom Goldgrouper for 23 minutes? I went into that going, I'm probably not going to catch the fish. I was also using it to farm. I was using it to farm gold grouper, uh, or just to replenish my orange script stocks because I could do that. But I knew going in, it's 23 minutes and I'm probably not going to get a bite, and that's fine because it had to happen. And that's kind of how a lot of discovery works. And I think going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, where 7.4 saw a lot more engagement, a lot more activity, you have to you have to be able to devote that time and you have to have that level of engagement to make that work. And yeah, it's going to be a waste of time sometimes, but it has to happen. And the point that I was going to make, I lost like halfway through that. um, but I think with Heirloom Goldgrouper being on Popular, that was a good that was a good thing. But also to your point, it does make it harder to go to somebody. Well, it makes it a little bit easier, but also harder to then go to somebody and say, "Hey, go use this bait that it's probably not going to be." But you need to test it anyways because Heirloom Gold Grouper now exists. So we have that precedent. We have that, okay, non-red maggot freshwater fish now exists. Um, yeah.
Like,
I'm trying to think of where I was going to go with that, and I lost myself halfway through that.
it is it's strange because I personally, like, especially as somebody, I don't want to say telling people what to do, but there's a degree of if I tell people go here with this, they will do it. Uh, the continued existence of, you know, the random one-off fish in a patch that uses not even a gill bait, but a low-tier script bait is a victory at this point. Continues to at least justify, okay, please go try these two things that are probably a complete waste of time. Because by technicality, it can be possible. And I think, fortunately, the fishing community and especially the people testing the value of the testing that needs to be done is seems like it's understood pretty quickly. So, you know, you are signing up to waste your time, but the time you've wasted is appreciated. And it is technically documented somewhere. So,
Yeah, because
it is counting for something.
you don't this is the thing that every discovery period I have to explain at least once. We don't we can't just data mine out fish conditions. If anything, we've had the opposite over the past. As you pointed out, we can't even determine if it has a weather and time condition anymore because they took those flags out. We are going in purely blind. And it requires input from people who are willing to devote the time. Some people don't even do like MSQ for a week because they're out testing all of these windows. Um, it requires that level of time and commitment, and it's really appreciated that you do it because with that info, we can now make guides. We can make references. We can be more accurate with we can be more accurate with our conditions to be able to support the rest of the community for the people who don't necessarily want to engage in discovery but still want to fish. We can help enable those. And so it is a big service to the community as a whole, putting in time and wasting 23 minutes and 50 bait on a window that's probably a dud.
As an example, with this fish in particular, there's somebody who, until it was found, was testing this fish with red maggots, and as an individual, they did 68, 20. Well, I'm assuming it's 23 minutes. Some of them might have been shorter, but if we assume that all 68 tests were 23 minutes, it's
Like 20
26
hours?
hours
Yeah,
of test.
20 something hours.
And ultimately, you can view this one of two ways. It was useless because that isn't what the fish bites on. But for many windows, they were the only person testing,
Mm-hmm.
and that is valuable. And I mean, we have track of all of it, but as I say every time it comes up, all we're doing is brute forcing our way to figuring out what the window is, and it is ultimately like inelegant as a process, but by virtue of what we are capable of knowing, it has to be.
Yeah. And brute forcing it is really like until they give us more tools to be able to identify, where fish are without data mining. Um, if you remember the old fish eyes trick, where we would just show up to a window and use fish eyes if the fish required fish eyes, and you would know immediately if it was if it was usable or not. Um, you just can't. You just can't do anything else. You just have to sit there and fish. And this, I think, is what also makes, uh, you know, I think this also, I should say, I think this is what has made it more social because I've noticed, and maybe, I don't know if you have, I've noticed a lot more people fishing together. Like they'll like maybe it's not one person, but maybe it's like two or three. I know it was like me, Nova, and Mafia were on Marlboro all the time. Between like Heirloom Goldgrouper, Punuity Pain, and Purse of Riches. Like the three of us were always there, and we were just chatting the whole time, and it was fun. Uh, so I think I've been seeing that too when with Discovery, and I think this patch and this fish specifically, I saw a lot of people just being like, "Hey, I want to go chill out at Heirloom. Who wants to go with me for like the next hour?" And they would just sit and chat and have fun. And I think that's great. I think that's a very quintessential fishing thing.
Yeah, I think that uh, perhaps this is a bit esoteric, but I think that kind of, I guess, interaction that essentially gets forced due to, well, I suppose the community is also forcing it by having the discovery function in the way that it does, but uh, it is a very it's a very I view it in my head a very MMO uh experience in the sense of like experiences like organic, social interactions that I feel like, really uh I don't know, were very emblematic of old MMOs. Fishing feels like a very something from an old MMO. It is
Yes.
very
And
it is very
it's
unique in this way.
it's one of the last things too in the game I feel like has been untouched in that sense. I know we're not talking about Heirloom Goldgrouper. I actually want to talk about Heirloom Goldgrouper soon. But
True.
I think at least with 7.4 this has been the strongest feeling I've had towards this in all of Dawntrail so far was how unique the experience of fishing is compared to like some of the other jobs. Like we know the hunt had Killergar. I know like they had their own little moment, but that's like a one and done thing. We get to do this every patch, and it's fun. And it is so unique, and there isn't really. I think what we were talking about this the other day of how Fisher was designed to be a community centric job. Like you were encouraged to go and talk to other people, fish with other people, share information, work together, do all those things outside of the game or in the game. Uh, and that doesn't feel like it's changed. If anything, in Dawntrail, it feels like they've doubled down on it, especially with some of these downtime fish, which Heirloom Gold Grouper is one of those fish. Um, when to kind of pivot a little bit, Heirloom Goldgrouper, one of the things that has stood out for me is its downtime. And this is not the last time we'll talk about downtime. Trust me. But Heirloom Goldgrouper, when we were doing analysis for Purse of Riches, I think me and Forpus mentioned this, and I'm sure a few others did as well, but I know I saw Forpus's numbers. Heirloom Goldgrouper is actually a higher excuse me. It has I'm losing my voice. It has a higher uh, average time between windows than Bob Goblin Bass and Cinder Surprise. If I remember correctly, it's like
Yeah.
Cinder and Bob are around 5 days between windows, and Heirloom sits around 7. So it's like literally almost on average once a week, which I think is interesting. And we see this a lot with the 7.4 fish, but with Heirloom Gold Grouper specifically, despite having a higher downtime average, it doesn't feel like a Bob Goblin Bass or Cinder Surprise or even Duskfish, which I think is like another fish that was up there. It has like it has a higher downtime than Scon and Ruby Dragon too. I think those are the ones that I did the math on. But it doesn't feel like those. It feels very more friendly, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think until like people, I mean, immediately when a fish gets found, for the most part, somebody will, I don't know, they'll plug in the condition somewhere and you know talk about the availability and whatnot. But uh, from my perspective, or at least as far as I noticed, the downtime was not immediately, uh,
Apparent.
for lack of a better term, yeah, complained about. And it helps that the next window after it was found was in 2 days. So,
Yeah,
that's not too bad by most fishers' perspectives. But it wasn't until I think the 4 fish of the patch that of which this is one, like all of the conditions were found in some way that it also got complained about. But I think even now, it is of the 4, it is the one complained about the least because
despite
it is
having
the most
yeah
benign
yeah despite having the
in
longest
window.
yeah despite having the longest average downtime, with the exception of Purse of Riches right now. Um, yeah, like I'm looking at Carby right now, and it's like you look at the downtime, it's up in 4 days as of recording, and then it's down for 14 days, 12 days, 10 days, 17 hours, then 5 days, 5 days, 3 days, 7 days, and then 20. Oh, really? There's a 27-day downtime at the end of April. I didn't notice that. Um, it's it doesn't feel like that though. It feel maybe it's because I got it relatively quickly. I think I caught it first window, and admittedly I haven't caught it again for the guide yet, but I've also just missed some of the windows because I don't feel like I need to be at them. Um, I think to what you were saying is, it helped that its window was 2 days later. It's the first second window were, 2 days apart. First impressions for fish are really, really important. And I think Heirloom Goldgrouper gave, probably unintentionally, a very good first impression for being, it seemed, relatively common biting. It didn't have a ton of massive downtimes early on. It just seemed relatively initially very friendly.
I think, I guess not exactly similar, but in terms of, if a fish can generate goodwill, it also immediately got goodwill for biting on Poplar.
Yes. Yeah, no, for sure. Um, yeah, it can do no harm because it does not like red maggots. Welcome to the resistance. The I think the thing though that came up during testing, and I'm saying this not as a conversation point, but more of a PSA, so everyone stops. Uh, there is a hidden fish in the Alexandrian ruins. It has no bearing on Heirloom Gold Grouper. It, if you see the message, it doesn't mean Heirloom Gold Grouper is about to bite because it's gonna bite regardless. Um, but that was kind of just a fun thing too. I think I think though on that point it was a little nice to have Heirloom Goldgrouper in the same fishing hole and window as a decent enough orange script farm. Like I would have recommended Goldgrouper as like an alternative to, condors if you didn't feel like going for condors. Um, Go ahead.
A fair amount of people, and this has come up in some way, not explicitly like this, but if there's like, oh, well, you can, while you're testing, you can also, do this and it's relatively harmless. But this came up especially because this is one of the, well, it's this fish, I think there was about a day gap between it, or day and a half between it and the one caught previous, but also this is after the, like, I think 3-day gap between. Either way, there
It
was
was in
a
pack
fair
two,
amount of.
yeah.
Yeah, this was when everything slowed down in terms of something being found.
Hmm.
So it's just, fishing mindlessly. Here there was a fair amount of, okay, well, I'm just going to go test Heirloom Goldgrouper now because I need orange scripts, which fine with me. It's not found yet, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean it
Uh,
works. I
and
was farming gold. I was farming gold.
incidentally, yeah, like exactly. A fair amount of people were just testing on popular because if you're fishing, if you're low on orange scripts, you're probably not going to use the orange script bait to test. So it worked out. And
Yeah.
that is interesting. If they can foster that behavior, I like that a lot. And I hope in the
Yeah.
future that somehow they are able to do that.
The the eastbound Zogor big fish that we'll get in 7.5 is going to be caught on Cactar jig just so that we can fish for condors at the same time.
Awesome.
That would be fun. Um, but I mean, beyond that, was there anything else? I mean, besides the downtime. So Heirloom Gold Grouper is one of the four downtime fish that we'll talk about. Was there anything else really like stand out about it? It's a pretty straightforward, 4 hours. That's nice. Non-intuition straight fish. Like it's not that hard. It's not. I don't want to say it's a hard catch. It's not that. It's just not that. You know. It's comfortable. I think.
Yeah, I think that uh it's like I guess it related to what you said where as a PSA, the proc is not for the big fish. Similarly, so far with every hole where there has been a lure fish and then something gets added which responds to the same lure but is not a lure fish in itself. There has not been, through testing, which obviously this fish has not been tested very much directly due to its uptime. But so far, it does not appear that um, adjusting your behavior around the procs is beneficial
Necessary.
in any way.
Yeah.
For this fish, potentially has the strongest uh, adjustment you can make, or the justification for adjusting your behavior, but it doesn't seem like it is necessary. And this is a possibility they can add. As you said, a next patch, we're guaranteed to get a big fish in the hole where the condor is, and uh, as we know, the proc rate, or the bite rate of the lure fish varies based on when
Oh,
it procs.
yeah.
So you could have that as a behavior, but we still have not had that. So overall, it's just a very benign fish, which I think for downtime fish, from my perspective, viewing people's responses, that's the most agreeable kind of downtime fish there
Yeah.
is, where it's just, okay, well, I'm here, so I'm probably going to get it. I don't have it caught yet, and I've showed up to every window, but I don't, as far as I can tell, that's pretty anomalous.
I've caught two. I caught the one in the first window, and then I caught the second one too during the expansion. Uh I think I was the one who I caught one between 12 and 1. And then I've been to maybe 3 or 4 windows since then, and I have not caught it on camera yet, so I haven't been able to make a guide for it. I just missed the window that was, I think was last night, or this morning or something like that. I missed it because I was just like, oh right, this is a fish I still need to go catch to make a guide because it is so benign. It's one of those where it's like it's not even on my mind of like I need to focus on getting this one, like Punuity Pain would be. So yeah, no, I think outside of downtime, it's a pretty comfortable fish. I think would probably be the way to put it. Um, that's really about it, I think, for heirloom on my
Yeah.
end. So let's move on to our next fish. We are now in the back half. Punuity Pain. This fish is probably my favorite of the entire patch. Uh,
I love Dordina fish too.
yeah. So Punuity Pain is caught in Peaks Poga in you're gonna have to help me with this one because I haven't learned it yet. Kazamaka?
Yeah,
I got it. Cool.
close enough.
I'll get that down by the end of the expansion. But it's during clouds to rain from 8 to 12 a.m. in the morning, and it is a mooch off of a Hunu peacock bass. And this is my favorite fish because it doesn't have, what I was talking about with Moxutural Greatgar. It isn't a fishing hole where you can just use lure to just kind of force your way to the fish you want to get. You actually have um you use lure as a soft slap. And this was with data that you had collected for bite rates for Punuity Pain. In order to go for Hunu peacock bass, what kind of what I've kind of recommended in my guides, I did a video on it, and what everyone's kind of started to adopt is you use ambitious lure, despite this being a very dominated, powerful hook set uh, fishing hole, but you use it to reduce the precision hook set bite, and then tie that in with a very specific time frame to just maximize your chances of catching a Hunu peacock bass. And it is probably the most fun that I've had for a fish so far this expansion.
I am exceedingly pleasantly surprised with this fish because I essentially the only redeeming thing about Dawn Trail, some of the Dawn, or I'm sorry, Endwalker, some of the Endwalker legendaries were good, but for me personally, really the only redeeming thing about Dawn Trail was the Dina fish.
Which
And
you wrote an entire forum thread on why Durdina fish was good and why you wanted more of them.
I will take personal responsibility for this fish existing. I'm okay with that because I am shocked that I do like it because I mean on paper it is in many ways very similar. And I was like, well, I do like that fish, but I don't really want Durdina fish too because I already have the first one. But it is different. Obviously, it's released in the expansion with swim bait with the lures, so it's designed with those in mind.
Mm-hmm.
When Durdina fish was not, Durdina fish benefits from both of those severely, but it was not designed with those in mind. And unlike many of the other holes in Dawn Trail, where the hole is balanced, and even if the bite rates, so many holes are 4 fish, and even if on every bait it isn't 25% chance to bite on each one, they're not so drastic. So the lure is normally beneficial either way.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, you have many considerations to essentially you can min max, which you can always do no matter where you're fishing. Min maxing is possible, but very rarely is min-maxing, recommended or
Almost
severely
required.
beneficial.
Yeah, almost required for Punuity Pain. Um,
And they did an exceedingly good job with that here.
yeah. So with Punuity Pain, the reason I like it too is that you're using so many different skills. You're using uh, you're using Patience 2, you're using Ambitious Lure, you're using Spareful Hand, Identical Cast, you're managing your GP heavily. This is the first time this expansion, I think. Yeah, I think first time this expansion that I have explicitly said you need to show up almost to prep with 10 Angler's art stacks just because you need that resource to make it easier on yourself. And you then need to rebuild back up to 10 Angler's art stacks after you're done prepping as well because you need it for the window. And that, I mean, I think like you were talking about we were talking about the method of just getting the Hunu Peacock Bass during prep. It's the same way that you get them during the window. But now you're under the pressure of having to do it within this is it four? It's 4 hours, right? Yeah, 4 hour time window
Mm.
in the morning, or else you run the risk of not having a very good chance of getting Punity Pain because Punity Pain is also down relatively often. It is one of the other. It's the second of the four downtime fish we'll talk about. And like it's what did I say? Its average uptime was like what 4 days between windows. Right now it's sitting at a 0.2% uptime as a window in a day and then a day after. There's also a Carby update. Um, but I think Punity Pain is like it's going to be a fish that I don't think is talked about enough in terms of like you should be looking for this fish, but it's one of those fish now where someone's like, "Hey, I got Final Fish. I haven't done any of the Dawn Trail fish. What's the big ones to focus on right now?" Punity Pain is up there. Because it could take you a little while. It could be I think I'm 3 or 4 windows deep into the recatch for the guide and I haven't got it. I got one bite and it slipped and it killed me. Um but it is easily one of those like top 3 fish that I would say this is one that you should focus on because it takes practice. I don't think we've ever had a fish that I have recommended showing up to just not during the window and practicing getting the mooch fish in order to maximize your chances during the window itself. I don't think I've ever recommended that, and this is the first time that I've done that, and people have actually been like, "No, actually, that was a really good call because that had helped me so much." It's great. I love Punity Pain.
I I'm very I'm very impressed generally with what they've been willing to do with mooches in Dawn Trail. And yeah, this especially, I'm very glad that they were able to make a, if, to be unkind, I will say a Durdina Fish sequel that does not just feel like it's the same, but for instance, like as Furkakada is a sequel to uh,
Aylet's
the
gone.
Shadowbringers Legendary that I can't pronounce.
Aylet's gone. Yeah.
It's a sequel, parentheses derogatory. This is, the sequel parentheses positive, where
Uplifting.
uh, good job, genuinely. And I'm very pleased that you did that with telling people to prepare for it because the reason why I made a forum thread about the Dina fish was because personally I was very irritated by 7.5 in Endwalker, a very large sentiment seen across every patch was, oh, well, I want hard fish. And then, okay, well, here's one. And now suddenly everybody's crying about this fish. Like, what, is this not what you wanted?
You've been asking for it, guys.
Here it is. And I, uh, I don't have an investment in, or I'm not desperate for every fish to be mechanical. I do not want, even as much as I like this fish, I do not want every fish to be like this. I think fishing would be significantly less enjoyable if
Mm-hmm.
every fish was. But I enjoyed Dardina fish so much, and I saw so much negative sentiment about it in an expansion where it was one of the only remarkable things about it that I was like, please, like,
Give
somebody
give us
enjoys
some more,
this.
please. No,
And I'm shocked, very like pleasantly shocked at the state of mooching in Dawn Trail as a result of seeing how people responded to a single mooch in Endwalker. I'm very glad that they were willing to make every Dawn Trail mooch that does exist, but especially this. And I'm very pleased that instead of, because there was a fair amount of initial, and I think I edited a post that I made about Dardina fish, where people crying about catching 0 to 1 sardines in a window, and cross out the sardine and put the
peacock bass.
bass, because it's the same thing where yes, like again, there is a certain amount of skill issue at play, and I think it is fine to you walk up to Peakspoga and you're not catching double digit Tunu peacock bass the first time you show up. That's fine because you can just get better. And I think the uh acceptance of okay, I need to practice, or I can get better at this, is very good to see from the community instead of just, well, this is actually terrible and I caught one fish this
I can't
window
do
and the
this.
fish
Yeah.
is bad.
Yeah, I think, and maybe I'll talk about this maybe more in our closing thoughts, but I think 7.4 was a really good fish patch for bringing back it being okay to not catch a fish in your first window. And Punity Pain is a really good example, I think, of being able to progress from almost prog. I dare to use the term prog, but it's probably the most relatable and it probably makes the most sense of, progging through Punity Pain in order to be able to, maximize your time to be able to catch it and be able to get more and more Hunu Peacock Bass each window, which leads to more chances for Punity Pain, which means it's more chances that you're actually going to be able to catch the fish and then be done with it if you want. Um, I don't know why you would. Punity Pain is absolutely fun for me to go for because of that specifically, because there is something that you're always learning and improving on each time. Um, I would love to see more fish like Punity Pain, but I don't. But to your point, it can't be every single one of them because that's just way too much. Um, there's a thing in my line of work in instructional design that we deal with called cognitive load, and it's basically how much thoughts and information and stuff a brain can process at any one time. And I think Punity Pain is a really good fish that throws your brain into like 100% mode and you're constantly going. And if every fish was Punity Pain, then you get really tired really quickly and then less people would be fishing and they don't want that. But having one, maybe two of these in expansion is a really good balance to have because then you get that engagement, you get that, drive, you get a little bit of push to, get a little better and, like increase your skill in fishing. I think Punity Pain does a really good job of that. And it's why it's one of my favorite fish of all time and my favorite fish out of all of 7.4.
I think that as well for um I think essentially, like the entire spectrum of people who fish, it is a good fish for several reasons, and perhaps a bit, I don't know the correct word, but essentially, um, as the Dina fish was in Endwalker, uh, it showcases that it is a direct example, like irrefutable, that they are aware of, the entire kit that exists
They,
because
they
you're being confronted with it here.
yeah, and I think Dawn Trail does that more often than Endwalker.
Yeah.
Um, just, I mean, I think from the start, it did it better. But Punity Pain is definitely your like final test of do you understand your fishing kit in Dawn Trail? And if you're not feeling like you're struggling with that, then you're good. Whatever comes after, you're going to be able to tackle. Pun intended.
It was as well during testing, a noticeable with the people who are actively participating where uh, I often do not count mooch reports as a single report. So often I do it half, especially on a fish like this, where especially before the fish is found and people are, tryharding,
Yeah.
that they may have, three mooches in a 23-minute window or something if they're, not trying particularly hard. So, but as especially once the fish was found, but there's still immense narrowing down that needs to be done. I think it might, no, I did it with the sidereal well as well, but telling people I need you to show up early to make sure you are prepared
Yeah.
for the window. It's one of the only fish that I've done that, and it is the only fish where during the testing period, the people participating in the chat were actively essentially commentating on, well, I'm getting better at this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few opportunities for people who do not take fishing extremely seriously, I think, to ever commentate something like that. So for a big fish, it's just a big fish. It's not a legendary. It's not a capstone of anything. Uh, Very well done. That you know, people who just are here to do a little fishing are able to notice a genuine progress.
Yeah. And I think that is just good to see. And I wish we would see it more in other fish. Um, One thing I have noticed too in Dawn Trail, and I don't know if this is just because Dawn Trail as a whole has done it better, or if it's just me noticing it more. But I'm seeing that sentiment throughout the entirety of Dawn Trail. So not just within Punity Pain, which is a very like localized thing of like I'm getting better at Punity Pain. I'm progging through Punity Pain, and that's good. I'm seeing a lot of people saying like, "Oh man, I am now learning more as I go on than I did than what I was able to know at the beginning of Dawn Trail." Like I just started fishing, I've learned so much, and I didn't see that very much with Endwalker because I think a lot of the Endwalker fish were very samey. Um, they felt very similar, so you didn't really need to learn. But we've had a nice progression of fish leading into even 7.4, where you kind of had to learn and do a little bit more each time. And I think Punity Pain was a good milestone for people to be able to hit and say, I have learned enough to be able to do Punity Pain, and I know and I'm confident enough because of that to then prog through Punity Pain. And so I don't see a ton of complaints about it. I mean, I see some, but every fish is going to get complaints, especially some of these now downtime fish. Um, but I don't see it being the only thing said. To your point, I am also hearing like, hey, I'm getting better at Punity Pain. I had 10 mooches that time rather than, my previous 6. So I think that's really good to see, and I think Punuity Pain is a standout fish for me beyond mechanics just for that reason.
Yeah, I think that it is they I don't know, perhaps it is also a testament of the fishing community in general, but
Oh, keep going. I accidentally broke
oh,
the slides.
but for a random community pain window is here, and what is the fishing discussion chat like and whatnot, significantly less vitriolic than
Yeah.
the average Dardina fish window during Endwalker, which,
No
given the
one.
downtime, I was very surprised by.
Yeah. Well, I think with downtime, and we're gonna get to this in a minute, I think it's being overshadowed.
Yeah,
I think a
I,
lot of
I
people are just like,
yeah.
well, it's not as bad as that guy. Um, but yeah. So anything else we want to talk about with Punity Pain? I mean, I think we've kind of covered most of it. Like it's an involved fish. You're using everything. There's actual progression and learning involved, and we're seeing that with our community. I think this one fish has really helped the community, at least the Discord community, um, not only be better at fishing, but also just better at understanding that it's okay to fail. It's okay to not have a window where you get a bite.
Yeah, I think that is similarly. It is. I mean, a fish like this, which I think them being more limited in availability is also good because also it. I feel like, for instance, when people are like, "Oh well, fishing is all RNG, you can't do anything." Easiest thing you can do
Mhm.
is be like, "Well, you have surface lab. It's always something you can do if it's a straight catch."
Yeah.
But it is much more easy to, I think, demonstrate to somebody. Uh, Agency is the wrong word, but the direct control you have over the outcome. Because if you just show up to a window and you have nothing prepared and you just go and you mooch, you will end the window with 0 to 1 Puno peacock bass and then complain about the fish being really terrible. But there was many factors in your control that you could have done to change the experience. And
Yeah.
I think that's much more easy to digest because when you actually do, you know, try, the outcome is apparent. Even if you don't end with the fish, you will have many more attempts, and that is tangible, like proof of your
Yeah.
ability to have an impact over what happens versus, well, I surface slapped something, but I
Yeah.
still didn't catch it.
There's much more uh I don't want to say reward. What's the word I'm looking for? There's much more responsiveness to being skillful than other fish. I think
Yeah,
with Punity Pain. I think if you're, it's almost like sidereal whale in that way, where like one of the big things when we were talking about sidereal whale back in 655, the big thing about sidereal whale was you have a ton of control over getting horizon events, and you need to get a ton of horizon events per window in order to have, to make sidereal whale more beneficial. And if you're not doing that, then you're not doing the best you can. And I think with Punity Pain, it's very similar in that sense as well. And I think that that's just a good thing to have for a fish in the game as a whole. Like everyone needs to have that one fish, and they all need to go through that one fish to be able to see, yes, you can do it. Yes, there's some skill involved, and yes, it's a thing that you have to pay attention to. But
I think good job.
okay, yeah. So thumbs up on Punity Pain. Okay, so next up, we're almost done. Hopefully a short jaunt on this one. Datnioides Aeroplanos. This is caught in Late Node Arrow in Living Memory. It is surprise caught during fog and terrain for another surprise 2 hour window. But this one is caught on red maggots, and it is a hidden fish, which means it requires uh, ambitious lure to be used in order for it to have a chance to bite. and its proc is on the third use. So you're always going to be using 60 GP per cast to have a chance at it biting. This fish, to kind of get us started, this fish immediately stood out because it was taking a while to find. We typically, when we had hidden fish, they were found relatively quickly because we can just use the lure to, find them relatively fast. But this one was in the second pack. This was one of the later ones found, and it's in a relatively rare window. Where at the time we were like, oh hey, uh, this is now going to be the new downtime fish. This is the new Bobgoblin bass. And when the morning that we confirmed the window, I made a post saying, "Sorry, Bob, your throne is now under threat because the guy has a 48-day downtime next year, 2027 for those who are listening." Um, and that kind of was the thing that stood out about it, was that it was a downtime fish, and I feel like this was the first time when we were like, oh wait, they're kind of bringing back the long downtimes.
Yeah, because this was the first of the fish with downtimes that are complained about that was found, and my immediate response was that I think that because this is the now fifth big fish that requires a lure, and if you are going to make a decent proc rate, maybe decent bite rate. You can't tell after the first window, but at least the proc rate seems fine.
Yeah.
Um, if you're going to make a fish that in window at least appears similar to all of the existing lure fish, which are also all 2-hour windows, the best implementation of it is it is a fish with a more uh, punishing, I don't know, downtime,
Mm-hmm.
where uh, you are rewarded for fishing intentionally, which with the lure fish you have to do
Yeah.
because it's not complicated, but if you don't fully understand the ability, you will be at a significant disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that to capitalize on game knowledge, you have to be doing something, fancy or, something that nobody understands. So I think that is a very good use of downtime as a mechanic if
Yeah.
you're going to regard it as one, especially in context of the other lore fish, because the first ones from 7.1, no weather requirement, just time.
No. Because I'm looking at the other fish were we had Moon Gripper in 7.1, Thunder Swift Trout in 7.1, Harlequin Queen came in 7.2, Crinchala Miyaka came in 7.3, along with, where was that other one that I just saw? No, actually, that was just it. And then
Yeah,
Datnioides
that's it.
came in 7.4. Did I forget one?
And nope, it's just those. And why because I think collectively the lurefish, they're all 2-hour windows. The
Mm,
proc rate, at least on the first four, seems pretty similar, potentially identical, and the proc rate on this one also does not at least seem different so far.
no.
So experientially in window it is similar, but progression, um, it is pretty sensible, and it reminds me of the implementation of external mechanics from A Realm Reborn, where if you do not know, people listening, weather transitions were, not if you can sort by patch in A Realm Reborn from when fish came out to see this. Weather transitions were not until the final patch where fish were added. It was originally just straight weather, and then transitions came later, things like that, where for these fish, it's okay, the first two in 7.1, 2 hour time window, no weather. Said the one in 7.2, it's weather, also 2 hours, but it is a 60% weather, so very high uptime still. Then the one in 7.3 is in a 10% weather, also a 2 hour window. So we're decreasing in uptime as it's been added, therefore increasing the need to optimize how you are using the lure. I think that's acceptable
Mm-hmm.
in terms of digesting how they're implementing this mechanic as a whole. Gameplay wise, though, it doesn't feel particularly
It doesn't stand out.
satisfying.
I think, well, so I think two things. With lure, we kind of see a better implementation of old fish eyes. So for those who don't recall was that 5.2? Yeah, 5.2. Pre-patch 5.2, fish eyes had a different functionality. It would have this buff that you would get at a fishing hole that when the fish that required fish eyes was available, you could use fish eyes and then it would give you a timed buff based on the fish. It varied. That would allow you to catch that fish. So it was basically like an on demand intuition that you paid GP for. Lures basically bring that mechanic back in the form of a per fish, per intuition, or sorry, per cast cost. So instead of costing a flat, how much was it back in the day? Was it 275? 500? No, it wasn't 500. It was
It was 350.
350. Thank you. I knew it was high, but I knew it wasn't 500. Um, so for 350 GP, which back then was a good chunk of GP, you would get this buff to be able to catch a fish. And they moved that instead of it being a flat 350 for say 2 minutes, it's now up to anywhere between 10 to 60 GP per cast, depending on at which point the proc occurs. And some lure fish don't have a chance to proc until the final stack. Like they might not proc until the third stack. Some fish might proc on the second or the first stack. Um, it's a different implementation basically of fish eyes, and that's really good. Now, something you said was all of the lure fish are 2 hours long, and I actually wonder if that's intentional because you now have this required GP cost per fish. In order for the fish to even have a chance to bite, there is theoretically a point at which you run out of GP and you can't use it. You have to wait for GP to regenerate. Now it takes a while. Definitely doesn't take 6 minutes, but there is a point at which you could run out of GP and thus lock yourself out from being able to get to have a chance. So I'm wondering if the shorter windows are GP minded.
Yeah,
To,
for these, I've been very curious to see if we will get one that is longer because it has very strange implications for GPUs.
yeah, because the only other lure fish that we've had were always ups. So you have like Clarion Carp, or longer window ones. So you have Clarion Carp, not Cloud Shark, Copper Shark, Copper Wasp. Those guys are up very often. So you have those very long windows, but you're not meant to be there for a while. And it's not like if you run out of GP, it's gonna take you another week to have a chance to get it, or it's not like you are gonna be locked out for the rest of the window. Um, Even with Copper Shark, there's which I got wrong. I think it says Cloud Shark, Copper Shark, and Cloud Wasp. With Copper Shark, you don't really run out of GP when you're farming, even on the longer windows of like multiple clouds going through it. Like I think I've done a whole hour and a half, and I never really felt like I was running out of GP, um, or at least to the point where I couldn't go. Excuse me, couldn't go for Copper Shark. So I'm wondering if for these big fish, there's a GP like there's a GP limit that they're like can't be more than 2 hours or GP starts becoming a problem, or 3 hours. So I would be interested to see if they go longer.
Yeah. Also, in addition, this is why also I feel like this fish is a very good demonstration of lore specifically as it's been implemented, because yes, they're all 2 hour windows, and this is, the upper limit of downtime, giant asterisk. But within the window, you're able to expend the GP that you need if you have, reasonable GP for being level 100. And it then, you start to run out, the window's over. Fine. But if they because lore can interact with other abilities, not everything, you can't mooch and whatnot, but or other mechanics. For instance, we don't have this in the overworld yet, but they have now shown that they are willing to implement this. Where one of the upcoming missions in Cosmic Exploration
Yeah.
has a lore fish and an intuition in the same hole, which since 7.0 we know is technically possible, just due to essentially where the information for each of those mechanics is stored.
Yeah, the for everyone listening at home, intuition is determined on a fishing hole level, so there will only ever be one intuition fish per fishing hole. However, you can have multiple lure fish, and we haven't seen this yet, but technically you could have more than one lure fish per hole because the lure is added on a per fish basis. Because of this, we've also believe and really want, and Square Enix, if you're listening, I would love to have this in the overworld. Um, Technically, it is possible to have a hidden fish that is also an intuition fish at the same time. And that's kind of what Tyo'to is mentioning with this upcoming mission in Oasis.
And as far as we know, there's it's just the intuition is very limited. Exactly as Fruity said, you cannot get around it. You can't be like, oh well, this intuition is gone, so I can get another one. As far as we can tell, it is impossible. But for example, lures have a limitation where if you use one, you cannot use the other. But there's nothing that indicates that a fish you cannot have a modest lure and an ambitious lure fish in the same hole. Also, nothing that indicates that you can't have two fish that respond to both. But uh, with how they appear in the data, you can't say that. I would assume, due to how old fish eyes functions, that if they did that, for instance, with this fish, it bites on, or it can only proc on the third use. So let's say they add another lure fish here. I would assume it would only proc on 1 and 2.
On 1 and 2, yeah, that would be my assumption. Because the
But
issue,
who knows?
yeah, the issue that we had with fish eyes back in the day, and I remember this very vividly at the flagship because Barrel Eye and Functional Proto-Hopkin were both fisheye fish. Um, you couldn't pick which one you got. So you would use cat noises. So you would use fish eyes, and based on the duration of the fish eyes you got, you would know if you got the correct one or not. And so if it was like, say, 60 seconds, you knew that was going to be Barrel Eye. If it was, 2 minutes, then you knew that was Functional Proto Hopkins. But you couldn't pick. You couldn't choose. You couldn't, determine which one was which. And that made it very frustrating. And so this is why whenever I talk about fish eyes, I talk about how it's a great mechanic for multiple reasons. And we're not even talking about like the GP hit that you take. So you're starting with less GP, requiring you to, think more about your GP usage. But fish eyes was a really good mechanic that was not implemented very well. And I think
And
Ambitious Lure does it way better, or the lures in general.
yeah, and I would really like to see, just because I think the best use of fish eyes was in Halo, which is the hole where Problematicus is from, because there's 3 fish eyes fish there, and technically and not necessarily the case now, but especially like right after fish eyes got uh, changed. And due to this, they actually changed what bites on all of the bait in Halo as well, due to fish eye changing. But in Halo, Fossil Tongue, Lava Lord, and the Lord of Lords were all fish eyes fish. And also a good example of something mechanically about the fish warranting prep that isn't just if you don't show up early, you will waste some of your intuition because the intuition is as long as the window is if you showed up early, it was easier to prepare the fossil tongues because it would be the only fish eyes fish that was available due to the conditions of the other ones. So in that case, an extremely good implementation, but almost every other implementation was very awkward when it came to there being multiple in the whole, and the lore is a much cleaner way to implement that, or at least appears to be that way. If they do ever add multiple of the same, I would assume that given what they did to fish eyes, that yeah, it would be, okay, this bites on this use, this bites on these other
Yeah,
uses.
because it's stacked now. I think the interesting bit too would be to see if they would ever do if they would not overlap on fish that bite on multiple slaps or multiple stacks, because I think what Moon Gripper can trigger on 2 and 3 for sure. I don't know, I forget if it can trigger on 1.
Moongripper can, the other big fish,
It cannot.
Thunder Suicide is 2 and 3, and every other one is just 3.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'd be interested to see if they introduce overlap there, even if it's by 1. So it's like 1 and 2 and then 2 and 3.
It is
Um,
also cleaner as well, just because of the message you get.
yeah, that was the other thing
I
too.
think.
Because you had to measure it, you had to determine it based on
Yeah,
the duration. Yeah.
because
Um,
I don't think this was ever a problem in the direct sense of, it was always easy to tell, but easy example for people who did not experience fish eyes. Another hole where there was two or more than one was Westmorn, where one of the fish eyes was 2 minutes. So immediately, when it ticks to one, then so you have the one for I
oh
think
yeah,
black magefish. But then
yeah.
Hraesvelgur's Tears was not even 2.5 minutes. It was like 2.3 minutes. And you can tell because it will still be 2 minutes. But
Immediately after, I remember
having
that.
having such fine timings, but having them not be precise is very awkward to the player compared to a message on your screen that is just like, this is
Like
the message for this fish.
yeah, a scythe appears in the water. It's way cleaner, I think. So yeah, I think the lures are just better implemented than fish eyes. Side fun fact, because you mentioned prepping for fossil tongues, Problematicus was when I was kind of self-teaching myself fishing back in, gosh, I think that might have been Stormblood, early Shadowbringers era. Um, at least self-teaching myself big fishing. Problematicus was the one fish that I was like, oh, prep is really important. I developed my own prep plan for Problematicus because of the fish eyes requirements. So definitely a good fish back in the day, and still I still think Problematicus is still relatively fun to go for.
Surprised at it managing to actually age pretty well because, yeah, I feel like I was a very strong fish eyes defender, and most of it was on the back of how good it was at Halo. And I was once they announced they were changing it, that was my biggest problem with it was how it affects Halo and how it affects Statacanthus. But
Because
I'm
Sculptor required fish eyes as well.
yep, and I'm very surprised that Problematicus managed to age very gracefully.
Mm-hmm.
But great job. But yeah, lures are just so much more straightforward, but not in
Clear.
a, yeah,
Yeah,
like
they're less
much,
opaque. And I feel like
yeah.
a lot of things with fishing, as we continue down the road of not talking about the fish that we're talking about, um, I feel like a lot of updates that they've been making, even in Endwalker, but mostly in Dawn Trail, just help remove some of that spare ambiguity, like that fringe ambiguity about fishing. Like we still have the core ambiguity of, you got to look up the guides. That is the design of Fisher. They have been, you even said this yourself, in a conversation we were having. It is the like core design of Fisher to work with other people to share information and do that. And we haven't lost that, but they've removed a lot of the other ambiguity of like with adding the exclamation points, changing fish eyes, removing how it works and adding it in with this new implementation. Um, the new hook set changes that came with 7.4. I think like those have all been really good, and I think that that's been a really positive thing for fishing as a whole without necessarily being super how do I put this, big. Like it's not like a big splash of a thing. Not, it's not like they reworked fishing the whole time. Like they're just making these little changes, and it's helping a ton. So
I think that what it's like I don't I don't remember why this was a discussion, but there was some like, how people do the meme where it's like, oh, congratulations on clearing whatever, it was
it
easier,
was easier.
it was harder and whatever. That kind of thing. Like fishing doesn't really have that. I mean,
Nope.
you could choose to be like that, I suppose, if you wanted to be, but uh it's very
The
much of the change since Shadowbringers is very
positive.
QOL
Yeah.
oriented.
The
Like, I
if, it,
don't,
if fishing doesn't get harder because the fish just don't change. Like nothing about the fish change. It's just you get more skills. Um, so one thing I'll be interested to see, thinking back about Datnioides, because Datnioides, until we talk about Purse of Riches, this is the fish where we were like, oh, this is the Bob Goblin bass of this expansion because it has a 48-day downtime coming up in the next 2 years. It has a ton. It is the downtime fish. This is a fish where we're now going to be able to start seeing positive use of fish eyes and lure, which we're not going to
mhm.
be able to test how any of that's going to work. I mean, technically, we could do it now, but we're not really going to see the impact of that until 9.0, because that's just when we expect fish eyes to become available for Dawn Trail fish because it lags behind two expansions. So right now it's just Shadowbringers and 8.0, and Walker will be able to use it. Um, but I think with Datnioides and even all these other fish, it's going to make fish eyes really interesting come 9.0 because I'd be really excited to see like how does I think Punuity Pain with fish eyes is going to be really nice. I think Datnioides is going to be really nice with fish eyes. I think most hidden fish are going to be great with fish eyes. Um, I think I think we're setting ourselves up for that. In a few years, we're gonna these fish are gonna some of these fish are gonna age really well, and I think Datnioides is another one of those fish where it's gonna end up like Bob, where come fish eyes, the downtime's not gonna matter. It's just gonna feel great.
Yeah. And something I had not thought about it, uh, not really until this patch in particular, because yeah, every time a fish got found, and then it's like, oh well, we're confident, or we're getting confident on the conditions. It's like, well, this will be a good fish eyes fish. Something that was a pretty common enough sentiment when fish eyes got changed was, well, like, I don't feel the need to use fish eyes, or I don't really feel a need to use it, or you know and even now with many old fish, Shadowbringers, there's certainly, I think it's the first time where people are like, I really appreciate fish eyes, and Shadowbringers is the beginning of significantly more smaller window fish.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into smaller window fish that are mechanical in a way that integrates with fish eyes pretty well. So
Yeah.
yeah, look forward to seeing how this is in 4 years.
Please look forward to it. Okay, we have two fish left, and one of them is the one that I know everyone wants to talk about. So why don't we move on to the other intuition fish of patch 7.4, Esperance Carp. Um, this guy is caught in Proto Alexandria, which is a fishing hole probably most people forgot about until this patch. Uh, in living memory, it is caught is caught during clouds after rain. So that's rain into clouds from 22 to midnight. So 10 p.m. to midnight. It does bite off of red maggots, unsurprisingly. It's a long bite, and it is a double fish intuition. So you need 3 golden days and 3 scarlet queens in order for it to bite. Now, I have a personal gripe with this fish. Going back to the conversation that we had with Shin Snuffler, with the way that the fishing holes are set up, we talked about this with Moxutural Greatgar, where we have that balance of bite types. So we have, balance of precision and powerful hook set fish. We saw that with Proto Alexandria as a 2 and a 2. And with the fact that this intuition is, a little over, just shy of 6 minutes. It's like, what, 550? Its window is also 6 minutes. So it's basically just like Shin Snuffler, except you have 3 additional fish to catch. And I am really not thrilled with that. I'm always happy to see an intuition fish. I'm happy that this was the Proto Alexandria fish. I'm fine with that. But this is another one of those fish that if they just shortened the intuition or made it a longer window, this would have gone from, like, in my opinion, like a C tier fishing experience straight up to an S tier fishing experience, because you would basically be having like a lightweight sea butterfly.
This is where, because with Shin Snuffler, especially, being found sooner, it's like, yeah, okay, I suppose it's, similar to the one from last patch. Last patch was a bit different because there's a lure fish in the hole, but okay, sure. But this one is when I was like, okay, I cannot responsibly give what my opinion is right now before seeing the rest of the expansion, because there are so many factors where I don't, not even I don't, it's why 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 do the two fish have different refresh rates
Yes.
if it doesn't matter?
Yes. So, okay, we've talked about this a little bit, but we didn't dive into it. With level 50, there's a trait called Fisher's Instinct, where if you catch a fish that is used to trigger an intuition for a fish, and if you catch that fish while intuition is active, there is a chance for it to refresh the intuition back to its full duration. Golden Day and Scarlet Queens, which are the 2 fish you need to get for the intuition for Esperance Carp, they have different rates at which they can actually force that refresh, and that is wild. Because yeah, Tyo'to, I know you've
It
done data on this go.
it's borderline offensive because every other, which, mind you, every other multi uh like intuition where there's multiple triggers that I have tested, the refresh rates appear to be the same. Obviously, I don't have completely even numbers, but the ones where I have tested the most, the rate is probably the same. At least, at the very least, the disparity we have with these Golden Day is 19%, Scarlet Queen is 10%, and the so as Fruity said, this is one of many holes where the byte rate distribution is even, but the triggers, Golden Day is a 2 exclamation mark, Scarlet Queen is a 1 exclamation mark. Golden Day is therefore under, well, the circumstances that the fish actually has, the one you want to slap.
Yep.
Because it aligns with the lore that is best used for the fish. So if you're
Scarlet.
using that,
I thought it was the Scarlet Queens. Were the Scarlet Queens are the strong bites.
oh yes,
Yeah. So you want to
yeah,
slap the Scarlet
sorry,
Queen.
backwards, yeah.
Yeah, you know you're good.
So
They're both orange.
yeah, it's yes, but for that reason, it just there's you can. This is the one where I was just I don't understand.
This
Like,
one had
why is
so
it
much
implemented?
potential. This fish has so much potential to be right up there with Punity Pain or Sea Butterfly or Charbonnet in terms of fun experiences, and they gave it a 2 hour window.
Like, genuinely baffling. And okay, fine, sure. I don't even care if I can fish eyes this in the future because I can fish eyes the other two
Yeah.
as well, and it will be the same. But why do they have different refresh rates?
It's going to be weird too because you have a 5 minute intuition. The duration of your intuition or the duration of your fish eyes is going to last less than the duration of the int. You're just going to be sitting there waiting, and there could be some interesting, optimization stuff to do that. We'll be able to start figuring that out next expansion with Maya Man
Yeah.
because that was the first. That's it. That's the most recent, more than 1 minute long intuition that we can do. Um, but this fish there was so much potential for this fish. This is the one that has let me down the most.
I I genuinely I do not understand, and I think it's completely fine that the other two function as they are. The other two intuition fish from Dantra. It's fine. I don't like it. It is my least favorite way to implement it, but fine. It's not that interesting. Especially those their intuitions are very easy to trigger. The fish is common, and you can isolate it. But this, I genuinely do not understand this decision, and it's very very strange. Um, the refresh did come in handy. The window I caught it because I accidentally triggered it early, so I refreshed partway through the window, so that was nice. But baffling decision that I don't. There's no way for this to be redeemed either.
Unless they just come out and just be like they change the fish in a patch. Um eh, yeah, this is one of those where it's like I can't even see how it would work with a legendary. Like cuz this if this guy had either a shorter intuition or it had a longer window, actually more closer to the longer window. If it was the entirety of the weather window, I would put money down that this is where the legendary fish would be, and Esperance Carp would be part of that because
I gosh,
that would have been so much fun.
like there's so much potential, and if you want to, you can essentially do the same thing with most fish, where it's like, well, if this under these circumstances, if this was like this, it could have been like this. But I think for a lot of people who are participating in discovery, it really hits with this fish because testing for it was more fun
Because
Then
you kept
fishing,
shading the intuitions.
yes. So people would be like, "Oh yeah, I refreshed the whole 23 minutes," or "Oh, I did it this long," or "Oh, I guess I'm testing another window because I'm still
Yeah,
refreshing from the previous window."
yeah.
And
I
that was genuinely more enjoyable.
my longest intuition was 21 minutes. And now this intuition is normally 5:50, 5 minutes and 50 seconds. And with it, you were just able to, with the refresh, you were able to just chain it. And I think I went for like 21 minutes. I think I was one of those people who was like, well, I'm still going. I might as well. Um, and do it. I think one person reported that they kept it going for almost two weather windows, I think at one point.
Yeah.
It was so much fun to be able to do that. And when I think this was discovered, I think overnight for me, I woke up the next morning and saw the window, and I was just like, oh man, this could have been. I was genuinely let down at how short the window ended up being. That I was so convinced that it was going to be a full weather window. Oh,
It is. It's so strange because uh you can, and like the refresh thing, you can refresh. I mean, you can refresh every intuition, but for the purposes of testing where it's been relevant, the other two dawn trail fish also are like this, where the I needed to use the very big sheet because windows were not a set length due to refreshing. So no matter what, refreshing is nice for testing. But the 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 fish being different rates shows a level of intentionality. I don't understand why you would do that.
typo again? I don't know. It
I don't know,
I
but
mean, it's hard to
it's
say if
interesting.
it's hard to say if it's even a typo because we don't know if the refresh rates are manual or not.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's so strange for it to be, as I think the Chaos Composer, who's doing most of the initial testing on it,
mhm.
showed the different rates, and I've said publicly, like, "Oh, that's very interesting," because every other fish with two procs, or two fish that can trigger, that I've tested, uh, the rates appear to be uniform,
Mm.
and uh, also the rate is similar across them. And it is neither of the two rates that these two fish have. So
Yeah, it
why?
yeah, I think Esperance Carp is the perfect example of it's okay to have longer windows later in the expansion. This is where I wish that they had the overlap. Like I would be perfectly fine if this was 20 to midnight and it overlapped with Moxutural Greatgar. I don't care. Moxutural Greatgar is one of those fish that it can be overlapped with. It's one
Yeah.
I'm like if it was it just needs to be shorter intuitions or longer windows for longer intuitions. That's what I want to see when it comes to these intuition fish because that's what makes them engaging and fun. And they don't have to be super duper like thought focused like Punuity Pain was. Like I know that's not an intuition fish, but it doesn't have to be like a huge thought. If this was just a 23-minute window, this just would have been Sea Butterfly Jr. and everyone would have loved that. I'm confident in saying that, even though people hate Sea
Yeah.
Butterfly.
People enjoyed fishing for it for testing. I know it
Mm-hmm.
was, for a while, it was one of the under tested ones, but it's because it's an intuition and it's, somewhat less straightforward, but it's more proactive than, slapping something and just casting and not really paying attention. But people did enjoy testing for it because that's when, the refresh mattered. But also, it's it's one of those things where before it got found, people were speaking about it in a way where, as if it was a given that the window would be long. And I realized afterwards, I normally correct people when they, make an
Make those
assumption,
assumptions.
and I don't think I ever corrected
I
that.
don't think you did.
I also just assumed it.
I know you're like, even I do this sometimes, and I think the mods and the expert anglers do it as well. And we did this especially during 7.4 of like, we can't assume anything until we've tested it. And everyone was like, yeah, it's going to be a long Esperance Carp window. And everyone was like, yep, I agree with you. And it wasn't. And it's not even a split window either. And it's not like I would have accepted something like Naboth's Saw, where it has a chance at a double window, even though it's technically split, because Naboth's Saw I
Yeah,
think has like a heat wave like combination that it could be. Like that would allow it to have had an extended window. That could have been,
yeah.
that would have been at least a better step. But the fact that it is literally just 22 to midnight, from everything we can tell, I'm looking at the data right now. It's it's what it is, and it's kind of like, oh, sad. Unless they didn't tell us and snuck in that they've split windows now so that they don't have to be contiguous, um, which I doubt. That's something that they would have told us, or we would have noticed that already. It's yeah, it's just a little. It's a letdown on Esperance Carp. It's still a good fish. Like I still think it's a good fish, but man, the potential for this fish to be fun and engaging without being, you know, something that people were going to hate was there, and it just did not get capitalized on.
It's a incredibly easy way to create something, yeah, more where you have to be more active, but not in a way where I think it would be perceived as difficult, while also showcasing potentially a new mechanic that we got access to at this expansion. Very easy.
Yeah,
And there would be no loss for this fish being available 16-0 instead of
22.
22-0.
Yeah. Yeah. But anything else we want to talk about before we go to the main event?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Here's the fish everybody wants to talk about. Purse of Riches. Purse of Riches is caught in High Tide Harbor in Tuliolol. It is caught from clouds in terrain between 16 and 1800 hours, and it is caught on Ghost Nipper. Purse of Riches has made Fisher headlines, I guess, recently due to the fact that it is the first ever fish, as far as we know, to go into or to have a weather condition of the two rarest weathers of a 5% and 5% chance, uh, like sequentially, and have a time condition at the same time, making it, as of now, the rarest fish in the game. Um, I have a whole video on this that I hope that you have watched beforehand, but if not, you can find it here on on my YouTube channel. Actually, did I even? No, I didn't. Okay, I thought I made a command for that. Um, but Purse of Riches, it is. Uh, we've talked about downtime fish. This this whole expansion with Heirloom Goldgrouper and Punuity Pain and what was the other one? I can't remember. Datnioides Aeroplanos. We've talked about it, and then Purse of Riches came in 25 days after patch, and we found it, which is a new record for modern discovery, and it is the second longest time that it has taken any single fish to be caught behind it was what 45 days for Bob Goblin Bass.
Yep.
Um and it is in the rarest possible weather condition that any fish could be in. So, This guy is currently on a 33-day downtime. It'll be back up in a few weeks. And then right after that, it's back for a few hours. It's back after a few hours, and then it goes into a 20-day downtime, then an 18-day downtime, then a 28, then a 1, then a 1, then a 14, 11, and 10. And sometime in August, and by sometime I mean starting on August 1st, it will be down for a record shattering 92 days. What do we think about this one, Tyo'to?
I I I think very simply, I would say that this fish poses an issue for Fisher as a whole, but not because I have an issue with downtime. I, as a individual, I do not care about downtime at all, and I do not care about the downtime of this fish. However, my immediate thought when it was becoming more and more obvious that what we had as its known condition was indeed going to be its only condition is I don't know how many people listening were fishing in uh, Stormblood or Shadowbringers, but it reminds me of Ruby Dragon, and in no positive way do I mean that. Where after Ruby Dragon got implemented, from my perspective, which I will admit, despite how long I've been fishing and how actively I have been fishing, I did not really engage with the community until Shadowbringers. But from my perspective, after Ruby Dragon got implemented, fishing and like the existence of big fishing became much more it seemed like I was seeing random people in game talking about big fishing and specifically talking about Ruby Dragon, and in not a way that was positive. And part of that is due to its downtime, which compared to this is very friendly. And Ruby Dragon also has other forms of perceived difficulty, whereas this is a fish whose difficulty is entirely its downtime. It is otherwise completely unremarkable, and there's not a single interesting thing about it. But I believe it poses a similar problem where it will be used by people, both who like fishing, don't like fishing, fish at all, or don't fish at all, to point at as look at how unreasonable this job is. Because
Yep.
that is what Ruby Dragon became. Ruby Dragon became this specter, essentially, despite, in my opinion, in Stormblood, it was not the hardest legendary. Stetacanthus was harder, and so was Warden of the Seven Hues, but
On
Ruby
content,
Dragon,
for
yes,
on content, Warden and Steth were harder. I still
yeah,
think pre Fish Eyes nerf, Stethacanthus was one of the most technically challenging fish in the game. Anyways, carry
yeah,
on.
absolutely. But Ruby Dragon has so many things about it that it's easy to point to as, for lack of a better term, a layperson, where it's it has some downtimes where you could be like, "That's crazy," if you consider a month bad, which most people would. But compared to what we have here, is pretty quaint. But it is mooched from a big fish, which if you don't know about fishing, doesn't mean anything, but I feel like is pretty simple to, digest if somebody explained it to you very simply. There's other things to be afraid about it or to point to try to scare your potential audience. And until Endwalker, I feel like Ruby Dragon was essentially this specter for Fisher where it skewed people's perspective on the job as a whole because of awful things they heard about it. And this fish is that. But unlike Ruby Dragon, who has essentially overcame that, there is no overcoming this. There is no way to say, yeah, this fish is down for 3 months and not have people be able to point at that and be like, this whole job sucks because of that.
Yeah.
And I, I might not care about that downtime, but many people, perhaps most, do. And regardless of if you as an individual care about it, it changes how people talk about Fisher as a job and also how they feel about it. And for a fish that is otherwise, this is the only remarkable thing about this fish. There's not a single interesting thing about it other
It
than
is
its downtime.
literally, when we talk about this fish, we are only going to be talking about its downtime today because there's nothing else remarkable about it.
And it's similar, like Ruby Dragon also, I feel like people are more willing to accept something that they feel is unreasonable because it's a legendary, and whether they understand what that is or not, if they're a lay person, again, you can explain that simply. There's nothing about this other than this guy in Tuliolal is down for 3 months. Why? Who knows? And it changes so much about how this job gets discussed. And I don't think the downtime is unacceptable to me personally. I just don't care. But I think changing how this job is perceived for the remainder of this game because of this fish is unacceptable.
I think I think Purse of Riches, I agree with you in that Purse of Riches is basically going to dominate Dawn Trail fishing, I think. Even if we find out that it's a bug, which there is a theory, and I'll talk about that in a second. Even if there is a bug, the fact that it has come up, we have mentioned it, people have noticed that, even before we discovered the 90-day downtime, we still were like, it's down, it's gonna be down for like 30 days often. And that was already dominating this conversation, on top of the fact that we had Datnioides Aeroplanos, which is basically Bobgoblin Bass 2.0, which it by itself would be, remarkable. That was fine though. People are like, oh, that's okay. That's just Bob too. This guy comes in, everyone's just like, oh, no, 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 no. This guy is now dominating all that discussion. And we're missing out on the fact that there's all these really other interesting fish like Punuity Pain and, and Moxutural Greatgar and all of these other interesting fish in Dawn Trail. And this one fish is going to define the entire expansion of fish, regardless or not if it's a bug. I say that because we have there is a theory that the clouds into rain condition is incorrect. And it's running on the fact that Purse of Riches and Punuity Pain on the client side data files are right next to each other on the list. Now, Tyo'to, remind me, is Purse first and Punuity Pain second? Is
Yep.
the tracking one? Okay.
I always order it in how they are.
Okay. That's what I thought, and I wanted to make sure. So anyways, there's a theory that the weather conditions got accidentally duplicated, and I have submitted two bug reports about Purse of Riches. One I sent, it was a couple weeks ago at this point, week and a half, saying here are the windows we think it is. These are all extremely long, and outside of nothing, is this a bug? Can you please check? And I got a response basically saying, if you think you're struggling or not fully understanding the mechanics, like that was like the generic response I got. Then I sent another one for Tyo'to, and we got another response, and we actually got that this morning, basically saying, we can't tell you, was their answer for this one. They being, the support guys, which makes sense. That's probably a policy. That's fine. I'm not complaining about the GM's responses to this. I'm just telling you what we got. And then Chaos then got submitted their bug report and got another response with a third answer, basically saying, okay, hold on, now we're going to escalate this. So we don't know if it's bugged or not. We don't know if it's going to change. We'll find out, if this is a bug that they were aware of before today, we might see a change in the hot fix, though I'm not expecting it. Um, but when we talk about Purse of Riches conditions, until we know for certain, or until we have decided that we have done everything we could to understand if it's a bug or not, we have to speak of it with a little bit of an asterisk because it is so out there from what we've had so far. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at with that right now. Now, the fact that Purse of Riches comes before Punuity Pain, in my opinion, I'm not convinced on the bug as much. If Punuity Pain was first and then Purse of Riches, I might be a little bit more swayed. But if Punuity Pain is second, I am less believing that that is the case. I think that they actually were like, let's let's add a downtime fish. Let's add this big fish. Let's do this intentionally and just just do it, I guess is probably, I mean, and I don't even think it's a see what happens moment. I think it's a let's do this and to give this fish character. And boy, did they. Um, but I'm kind of with Tyo'to too on this, where the downtime doesn't bug me as much. It bugs me a little bit more than I think it bugs Tyo'to, but that's only because I am the guy who has to make the video guide, and I would like to have it out this expansion. Um, but the downtime for fish doesn't bug me, but I think that downtime needs to be reasonable for players. And I think Purse of Riches is maybe just slightly too far past that in order to be reasonable. Because I know like Zin and I think Nessa have been talking about how I mean, they work full time jobs. They can't fish during the day like some folks can. They're not going to be able, like, after this upcoming window, they're not going to be able to catch a fish until like June. Um, and that's assuming they don't get, and that's assuming they don't get it, which I think is a little bit unreasonable when it comes to downtime fish. But I think long downtime fish still need to exist. So I think Purse of Riches is just a little bit outside.
I would say that it's a strange thing to be put in a position where there's reason to talk about it because, for instance, if somebody's like, "Oh well, this is," most people probably either just directly agree that person riches is unacceptable, whether it is personally unacceptable to them, or they're capable of think outside of yourself and acknowledge that it is unhealthy for to exist just for a community at large. But you can then you will potentially, or you will have somebody attempting to discuss, well, I think this other downtime that you've now posed as reasonable or acceptable is also unacceptable. And with having to or attempting to communicate with somebody about this downtime, personally, I find it very awkward because
It is really weird to be
it,
like,
it is
yeah, I catch this fish in August. That's it.
it's it's very strange. And uh I just the implications for future things about this job are very strange. And I think I said this only privately, this is one of the very few things we have remaining that are on the list of, well, this is technically possible, but this will but it hasn't happened yet, that I thought was never ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I absolutely like, and this has come up before uh when discovery is happening, when there's a new patch of big fish. I have all of the windows mapped out for every area that fish are in. I have the next 10 windows mapped out, and I will occasionally, post some that are, interesting. Like, I think this patch I posted one where in Heritage Found there's one
The
very rare
100, yeah,
tradition
the
that was down for
151, I
like a
think.
year.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, so
right. The 357, I think it was 365.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the year long downtime.
And I don't post that ever to be like, oh, you should worry about this. The reason I post it is I'm just like, oh, it's funny, but it doesn't matter. Okay, sure. But never with the intent to scare people or, make them think that this is a real possibility. It's just, oh, this is an interesting thing because this is how weather functions in this game. And it is an interesting curiosity. And frankly, if this fish is meant to be this way and stays this way, I will probably stop doing that. Um, because now it is just a genuine possibility. And that
I
is annoying.
I made
Like,
the joke back in Endwalker because there was the Garlemald downtime of like 130, 170 days for what was it
yeah.
like Thunder and at the in the evening. I made the joke of publicly saying, "Man, that would be kind of fun if it was a relatively easy catch. I think that that could be cool. That would work. And now we have Purse of Riches, and I kind of half don't regret it, but also if I knew that they were listening, I would have said something else. um I just I think that of all the things to what you were saying, like there's a lot of fish types, fish, things that we could do but haven't seen yet, like the intuition lure fish. Like we hadn't seen that yet, and we'll get that maybe in uh, cosmic exploration. We could have, I think, like right now, the slipperiest fish in the game is the matriarch at 92% slip rate. We could still go up. We could still do a 98, 99% slip rate fish. Like that is something that could happen. And we never really were like going, yeah, no, that'll happen because it was just so outrageous to hear. It was like it was always a joke. Um, and now we're just kind of in that timeline of, oh, the extremes. I'm realizing the pun of that now, considering this patch's raids. Um, like the extreme ends of these fish are something that they have considered. Maybe if it's not a bug, again, we're talking this with a little bit of uncertainty. Um, like this very much could have been an always up fish that is a 99% slip rate, which would have been fine. I don't think people would be talking as much about it if it was that. I think it's the fact that it is a downtime fish with these massively long downtimes, and that is something that people latch on as bad. And I think one person described it as hostile game design. And I was like, well, it's one fish. There is one fish that does this now, and it's going to dominate, to your point, all the conversation about Fisher, despite there being, 300 other big fish, over 1,700 fish in general, and it's this one fish is going to define how Fisher comes out. So I think my stance still stands on it as we Purse of Riches. I don't mind it existing, and if it doesn't change, I'm not going to mind. But I really don't want to see Purse of Riches downtime again for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think that it's it's regardless of anybody's individual opinion on it. Um, Downtime is it's honestly something that I really do not like talking about ever. And I tend to avoid conversations on it when I see it, and when people have, personally asked me, like, oh, what do I think are the hardest fish, or what do I think makes things difficult?
Which
I
is a
always
whole
say,
other conversation. That is, what
sure,
is the hardest fish is a whole other conversation that will
yeah,
never have a conclusion. Period.
yeah. But personally, I always say downtime is not a factor. And that is the case with this fish as well, which is why I have, emphasized there's nothing else to this fish. It is from the windows that have been attended, which are not many, but have been very well attended.
Mm.
It is a good bite rate, not a remarkable escape rate. So all it has is its downtime, which is fortunate if this is its permanent condition. But regardless, the downtime is all that will be spoken about. And the downtime is, I think, for both people who engage in fishing, but perhaps, for big fishing, they engage with it for the achievement, not for the fishing element, or people who just don't know about fishing. It is the easiest thing to point to and judge the entire job as unreasonable, which I don't think you should do as somebody
Espe-
who likes fishing, but I
especially
understand
when,
why.
especially when there's other, and I'm going to say this not to excuse it, but there are other achievements. If you're in it for achievement hunting, there's other achievements that are going to take you longer than to catch Purse of Riches. The hunts, like leaves, uh, cursed hordes. Like there's a whole bunch of these other. I don't want to say a whole bunch. There's a handful of other achievements that are going to take you longer than anything to catch Purse, and yet this is what's going to get the focus.
Yeah.
Carrots, yeah, no, fortune carrots are a new one that came up recently, and I think going back to almost the start of this conversation where we were talking about Shin Snuffler, um, it almost just when you have a fish that is such a long downtime and it doesn't have anything else going for it, it is basically just a check mark. It's just it there's nothing else there. It literally is just there to check off. And you can't have too many fish like that because then it just becomes boring. And I that's the one thing that I don't like with downtime fish is when they get really long, like Purse of Riches is now, and a little bit kind of like Bob Goblin Bass and even Cinder Surprise, they just basically become little check boxes that you just show up, you get it, you're done, move on. There's nothing else memorable about them.
To the listener, I would like to ask, like, do you remember when you caught corpse chub? You probably don't, because it is a very unremarkable fish from 4.4. And that is what this fish would be if it had corpse chub's availability of clear skies. There's nothing to talk about this. Therefore, there's actually unfortunately going to be a lot of discussion about it.
I mean, like we are right now.
Exactly.
I mean, and the one thing that I do say, and we talk about flavor fish, is I think Purse of Riches though is like the ultimate flavor fish for just describing the possibilities of the ecosystem and the world in the game. How there can be, excuse me, this one standout fish that can like exist in the world and have all of these, conditions that require it to appear to people. I think is cool for storytelling, but as a player, it's if you don't appreciate the storytelling, it just becomes a hassle. and it just becomes a bit of a pain. Um, so yeah, if this ever becomes an aquarium fish and the conditions don't change, it's going to be uh both worth more than anything and not enough. But
Yep.
that's purse of riches. Anything else on purse that you want to discuss? I actually think this was one of the shorter conversations, but there wasn't much to talk about.
No, just something that you brought up in your video about it specifically, which I do agree with, and is unfortunate that I suppose it's probably a bit of an underappreciated thing, but it kind of has to be as a function of the popularity of fishing in general and the community aspect as well. Is yeah, downtime itself is yeah, almost necessary to create certain community aspects around fishing and also just yeah narratives. Because everybody who I think most people who do big fishing, you know, you probably do it once in terms of getting the achievement, and there is an individual story that goes with that, and to some degree there will probably always be a oh during the downtime for this or between the downtime for these things, or you know the Bob Goblin Blitz where how many big fish can you catch in a single Bob
Bob
Goblin
Goblin
Bass
downtime.
downtime.
Yeah, I
Those are
think
very unique things.
I think they're doing a new one too for Datnioides, the Datnioides Dash.
Yeah, you've got a few contenders this batch. And I think that is good. Something that I really enjoy about the fishing community, despite being an incredibly asocial individual, is that for the active members in it, there is the essentially creating your own joy element of it because most fishing, including big fishing, especially big fishing, is very straightforward. And if you genuinely enjoy it, as in you engage with it more than checkmark completing, you can create events, community things, stories, whatever, around the fish themselves. And downtime is actually one of the easier ways to do that.
Yeah,
But at a certain point, yeah, I think there is a limit where it stops becoming, well, this is interesting to, okay, most people are going to be complaining about
yeah.
this. And I think instead of, you know, seeing it in, you know, Discord where it's like, hey, you know, this transition that is not the transition for this fish that we already found is down for a year is one thing, but the equivalent of that being implemented because that transition mentioned is also the same rarity as Purse of Riches transition
I
is
have numbers on that.
it's just I don't know it's not something I want to hear about for the rest of my time playing this game. So I really hope that it is unintentional, but I would not be surprised
If
because, as
it's
I said,
yeah,
it is one of very few things that has never been done that they have always had the ability to do.
yeah. To discuss the downtime, one of the things that I did do back when we had just a few weeks ago, back when we were doing testing for Purse of Riches, there was like maybe 5 windows left, but because of what was left and because it was tested, we knew it was going to be one of 3. But we were just testing all of them to be sure. And that was, Cloud Serene, which is what we originally found it in and what we ended up, it actually being. And then it could have been in clouds or rain into rain, or clouds into rain or clouds. And I did the math on those, and quite literally, I mean, unsurprisingly, clouds to rain was the worst in terms of uptime with, roughly 19-20 days on average between windows with a maximum downtime of 141 days in 2047 is when that'll come up. The other two weren't as bad. If it was clouds, rain into rain, it would have been an average of about 12 days between windows, which is not great, but it's still like if Bob is 5 and Heirloom Goldgrouper is 7, it's not that big of a reach. It would have had a maximum downtime of 127 days, but then the last one we tested, which was clouds into rain to clouds, that one also had an average downtime of 12 days, and it could have had a maximum downtime of just 87 over the next 100 years. And this was the timeline we ended up with that. So if we go farther out, there is a chance that there could be like the even longer, longer downtimes. But really, in the immediate, say what next, we say 4 years until 9.0. In the next 4 years, there's 1, 2, 3. There's only 3 days or 3 windows or downtime, excuse me, that go over 50 days. And there's 2 that hit over 90, the 92-day downtime coming up, and then 1 in 2029, which is 98 days down between July 11th and October 17th. But then there's a spackling of other 30-day downtimes in there. That's not too bad. Anyways, I just want to throw those numbers out there to kind of just give a little bit of a context of how this is working, and to kind of also reassure people that the 92-day downtime is incredibly outlying for Purse of Riches while it matters. It really, you're only ever going to see 90 plus twice in the next 4 years. And then even after that, it shows up another 2 years later. And then after that, it doesn't show up for another 4. So it's like in the next 10 years, it's only going to go over 90 days 3 times, 4 times, something like that. And yet this one coming up this year is going to be the one that matters because it's the one you can't use fish eyes for. Anyways, I wanted to throw those numbers out there before we kind of finished talking about Purse. But again, any last minute things here before we wrap up?
No.
All right, we did it. We talked about all of the 7.4 big fish, and it took less than 5 hours. And not for being close though. Any closing remarks, question, or stuff that you want to discuss as we wrap up, things maybe to look forward to in 7.5, or anything like that?
Well, first, I would like to say, if you participated in the Discovery Dispatch, or you would like to in the future, I highly encourage you to do so. All you have to do is join the fishing Discord, if you're not already. But a lot of people this patch and last patch where there were it was very noticeable how many new people there were. Express a lot of like, oh, I don't know what to do, or I don't know what I'm doing. You don't have to know that much.
Can you fish? Yes. Cool.
You just
know everything you need.
You have to go somewhere and then put in a Discord channel every 23 minutes. If you're testing for longer than 23 minutes, what you do. And that is it. But you do not have to test for 23 minutes. You just need to let me know how long you fished for, and that is it. It's very straightforward. Everybody who has come in to ask or while expressing that they don't know what to do, if they have commented after, have expressed sentiment that it is easier than they thought it was. So please do not be discouraged if you don't know what to do. In fact, nobody really knows what they are doing, which is kind of the whole point.
Yeah, fishing is a lot of us just winging it as we go.
And second, I saw somebody ask in the comment of your video on Purse of Riches, what you and I would have as alternatives to increase a fish's rarity that we would like, or possibilities with the current kit or future kit. And I would like to say for that,
By all means.
I'm not a creative person, so I do not have any ideas that I think would be good for the future kit. And I said during Endwalker that fishing could get absolutely nothing in Dawn Trail and still be broken.
And
And I do think that is true.
that is, I'm going to say that going into 8.0 as well.
Yes, and it is more true now.
We are
Uh,
busted as hell.
so I have no idea what to expect, and yeah, I do not consider myself creative or good at designing, so I don't think anything I could come up with is a good idea. My main concern, honestly, in the future is bait. Um,
Yeah.
I do not think bait is in a very good state right now, and uh, I understand a lot of the limitations that bait has, and it's so strange because conceptually, I do like the way bait is handled, the freshwater bait, where it staggers in what is usable. I think that is interesting conceptually. In practice, I don't like it, but I have seen a lot of sentiment about, well, why does multiple bait exist at all? Which I completely understand why players have this sentiment, but I do not want bait to become homogenized to the point where there's a freshwater bait, there's a saltwater bait, there's a magma bait, there's a sky fishing bait, and I do not think that will ever be the case, to be honest with you, simply because if that did happen, it would be script bait, and then it would be impossible to fish anywhere without using script bait unless you use versatile lore.
Which is a
And
nightmare.
yeah, so it is possible, but I don't think that would happen. But I also didn't think there would be a 5% to 5% timed fish. So what do I know? Um, but I really don't want it to happen as well.
Not on
So
not on the Dawn Trail fishing bingo card
yeah.
was that.
So I don't know. For me, rather than anything in the kit, bait is a very big concern for me. And I understand, like, I'm assuming design wise, it's just not considered a problem, or perhaps it's, well, big fishing is endgame content. Endgame content use endgame currency. I don't know, but it's for me, I don't feel like I really am not an individual who cares about my immersion with fishing. I don't remember what somebody was talking to me about fishing for, but I said the fact that it is fishing is irrelevant to me. It's the gameplay loop itself. Like, it could be mining, it could be botany. I would not care. Um, but somehow the bait changing to, yeah, that hypothetical of, well, there's one script bait and I don't know, maybe one gill bait that is known to be irrelevant for big fish. I do not want to see that, and I I don't know. I really hope that they change how they approach things biting on bait in 8.0, because it is getting more and more difficult to feel okay telling people, I need you to test on this bait that
when
very
when you
likely
know
is not
it's
going to matter.
yeah, when in the end it's not. Yeah. I do a whole video talking about bait, and you can find that on the channel. It was from a couple of months ago. I think bait and how it interacts with fish is probably the biggest point of innovation that we could see going into 8.0. It's something that I would like to see more as well. I'd like to see if we're gonna. I think we should keep. I'm with you. I think we should keep as much bait as we have now. I just want it to be used for more things. The fact that they limited baits to certain zones, I think, was a interesting take in Dawn Trail, and I would like to see that more refined and improved on in the future. Mainly because I think bait is a vector for strategy approach. I think having bait, being able to use different baits in different fishing holes changes the approach for fish, or could be used to change approach for different fish. I think it could be interesting that we could see big fish that can be caught on multiple types of bait and use that as a way to determine a different type of strategy for approaching that one fish. Like we see right now with mooch fish for like Punuity Pain or Takatoa. I think that could be interesting as well to see is just making bait more impactful on within the fishing hole, make it swing way differently than it does now, and that could lead to a lot of interesting things.
Something that I don't know how many people know this because don't think I don't think it's displayed well in a place like Teamcraft necessarily, or at least if you're just looking at what does like how do I catch this? There are fish, multiple, who do bite on multiple baits, and as everything that is most awkward with Fisher, it stops in Heaven's Ward. But Merciless does bite on a bait, or it can be a mooch. And in Heaven's Ward, this was very nice because it bit on the high tier script bait, and scripts are an entirely different issue in Heaven's Ward, and they were capped weekly. So this was a very nice mercy. Oh, ouch. Oh, fuck. I didn't mean to make that joke. But
I didn't catch it until now. If you didn't say anything, I would have just been like, "Yep, I agree."
but I do think that that is something very easy that they can do, especially because the the other freshwater bait, or well, the gill freshwater bait, have been used to this expansion, but it's all for mooches. So if that is what they're going to continue doing going forward, I think they should also do the inverse. And you can, I mean, they do have different bite rates when this kind of thing has been the case, even when it's two things biting on a bait directly, which happens with a few fish in a realm reborn. It's bait is such an, I don't know, easy is a bit wrong, but it's it is very simple, and yet
Straightforward.
it somehow is still much, our use of it is incredibly simple within the realm of simplicity that it occupies.
Yeah. I had a note and I can't remember it now. My brain is just oozing out of my ears. Um, oh, right. We had a brief moment for at least a patch and a half in Endwalker where we had, straight catch fish or mooched fish could be caught straight catch off of a versatile lure. And that was weird. And they took that away. And I think that was the right move. But I also wouldn't mind seeing something like that happen again. But, bring back that A Realm Reborn era of fish where like Dendeki has like three potential things that it could catch on, either straight catch, first mooch, or second mooch. Like Nepto Dragon can be caught off a mooch. If you didn't know that, we always recommend straight catch because it's the most straightforward and easiest to handle and pretty good. But it bites off of Merle or goby. So that would be, that would be something to look into as a potential expansion of like, and if give big fish more bait that they can bite on. I mean, I would be fine with that too.
Yeah, and it's a bit funny to me because the implications of that make managing everything about Discovery significantly more harder, but I still would like to see that simply because it is the alternative of bait essentially becoming irrelevant is in my mind significantly worse.
Yeah,
So
it's
I think it's fine.
the sacrifice you are willing to make. Um, but anything else before we wrap up?
Nope.
Okay, well, just at the 4 hour mark of streaming at least here. The VOD will be shorter because this is including the 10 minutes or so of chatter at the beginning. Uh, uh, we're done. Thank you everyone for listening, and again, thank you so much, Tyo'to, for joining. We'll do this again sometime because I have been criminal at not having these conversations with you more often on camera at least. Uh,
Of course. I love
I
talking about
will.
fishing.
I couldn't tell. I had no idea. I will though be linking Tyoto's socials. Let me actually just do that now. But I will be linking Tyoto's socials in the description of the conversation below. And so if you want to follow Tyoto for more occasional fishing stuff, because I know you don't post very often, but if you'd like to do that, you can follow Tyoto on Blue Sky and on the Twitter. Anywhere else that people can follow you should they want to at least see when the discovery spreadsheets are coming up or any other things that you're doing?
Realistically, if you for some reason want to hear from me, you should probably just join the fishing Discord if you're not already in it.
Which is
I
discord.gg/fishcord.
I forget to post things that I probably should post to social media just so that well, mainly the Japanese people that follow me can see it because I assume most English speaking people probably do see it in the fishing Discord. But I don't do anything interesting anywhere else. So if you're not in the fishing Discord and you really want to see me talk too much about fishing, there you go. And if you want to participate in Discovery, you have to be there.
Yep. And I mean, and as we said, discovery. As long as you have a level 100 fisher, you have all your folklore tomes, and you know what some of your buttons do, you can help with discovery as well. We'll have that again coming up in patch 7.5.
Very important to note because this is also probably the second biggest concern is if you genuinely just want to help in discovery, it does not matter what your stats are whatsoever.
Yep.
You just need to be able to use the bait and cast into the hole. If it's a mooch, I guess it matters because you need to catch
Need to be
that.
able
But
to mooch.
if it's a straight catch, you can be naked.
Yep. So, anyways, my name is Fruity Snacks. This is the type of content that I like to make. Thank you for listening to this ramble live. You'll be getting the VOD for this. Well, now if you're listening, the VOD will be up because you'll be listening in the VOD. But if you're watching live, it'll be tomorrow. And again, you can follow me on Blue Sky and on Twitter and on YouTube. So once again, thank you everyone for listening, and again, thank you Tyo'to for joining. I don't think I have anything else coming up. So again, thank you everyone for watching, and good luck and happy fishing.